If you've played NieR Replicant, you know that this game doesn't just tell you a story, it makes you complicit in a tragedy. If you haven't played it, prepare yourself, because we're about to unpack one of the most intricate and heartbreaking narratives in gaming history. This is a story that director Yoko Taro crafted with the specific intention of making players question their actions, their assumptions, and the very nature of video game heroism. NieR Replicant exists in a strange space in gaming. It's simultaneously a beautiful fairy tale and a cosmic horror story. It presents itself as a standard action RPG where you play a hero saving his sister from a terrible disease, collecting magical verses, and slaying monsters. But underneath that surface lies something far more sinister, a narrative that reveals, piece by piece, that everything you thought you knew was a lie, and every victory you achieved was actually an unforgivable atrocity. The world of NieR is one where humanity has already lost. The game takes place thousands of years after the human race technically went extinct, in a post-apocalyptic future that has regressed to medieval-level technology. The remnants of the old world, rusted robots, mysterious facilities, ancient weapons, are the landscape like tombstones of a civilization that reached too far and paid the ultimate price. But here's what makes NieR Replicant special. It's actually part of a much larger story that begins with a completely different game. NieR is a spin-off sequel to Drakengard, specifically following one of Drakengard's joke endings. That ending saw a giant magical boss dragged through a portal into modern-day Tokyo, where it was shot down by Japanese fighter jets. The boss's death released a magical plague called White Chlorination Syndrome that would eventually doom humanity. Yes, really. That's the canon origin of the NieR universe. The original NieR actually came in two versions, NieR Gestalt for Xbox 360, featuring an older father protagonist, and NieR Replicant for PlayStation 3 in Japan, featuring a younger brother protagonist. NieR Replicant ver.1.224744871139 is a remaster that finally brought the Replicant version worldwide with updated graphics, quality of life improvements, additional voice acting, and a brand new ending that bridges the gap to NieR Automata. What we're about to explore is the complete story, the prologue set in 2049. The main game set over 3,000 years later, the multiple endings that each reveal more truth, and all the weapon stories, side quests, and hidden details that paint the full picture of this tragic world. We'll examine how Project Gestalt was supposed to save humanity, but instead doomed it, how every character you meet is broken in their own way, and how the game's structure itself is part of its thematic message. This is a story about a brother trying to save his sister, but it's also about the last desperate attempt of the human race to survive. It's about souls without bodies and bodies without souls. It's about a hero who becomes a villain without ever knowing it. It's about love so powerful it destroys everything, including hope itself. Before we begin the full journey, I want to set expectations. This story doesn't have a happy ending. Every ending is tragic in its own way. Yoko Taro, the game's director, is famous for creating stories where everyone loses, where sacrifice is inevitable, and where the best you can hope for is a bittersweet goodbye. NieR Replicant is perhaps his masterpiece in this regard, a game that makes you work for every revelation, that rewards additional playthroughs with perspective-shattering information, and that ultimately asks you to delete your own save file if you want to see the true final ending. So grab some tissues, settle in, and prepare yourself for one of gaming's most unforgettable narratives. This is the complete lore of NieR Replicant. Chapter 1, the prologue, Summer 2049, where it all began. Our story truly begins on a cold summer day in the year 2049. Yes, summer, but the world at this point is locked in an eternal winter, a magical snowfall that never stops. This is 15 years after the White Chlorination Syndrome first appeared in Tokyo in 2034. Following the events of Drakengard ending, humanity is on the brink of extinction. The prologue section of NieR Replicant is arguably the most important part of the entire game, even though many players don't fully understand its significance on their first playthrough. You control a young man, the original Gestalt, the true protagonist of this tragedy, who is desperately trying to protect his sick little sister, Yona, in the ruins of a dead world. The setting is bleak beyond description. You're in what appears to be a rundown supermarket in a Japanese city, scavenging for any supplies that might help your dying sister survive one more day. The world outside is buried in unnatural snow, the streets are empty of human life, and grotesque creatures called shades wander through the ruins. These aren't the shades you'll fight in the main game. These are something else, human souls twisted by the white chlorination syndrome into monstrous forms. The white chlorination syndrome is the magical plague that began destroying humanity 15 years prior. It turns people into statues of salt if they fail to resist it, or transforms them into violent, red-eyed monsters called the Legion if they submit to it. There's no cure, there's no immunity. The disease spread across the world with supernatural speed, and within a decade, human civilization collapsed completely. The protagonist and Yona are survivors, but barely. Yona is sick with a terrible cough, the precursor to the Black Scrawl disease that will haunt the main game. She's weak, malnourished, and fading fast. The protagonist is doing everything he can to keep her alive, fighting off shades, searching abandoned stores for medicine and food, anything that might buy them another day. The gameplay in this prologue is deliberately simple and brutal. You have basic combat abilities, and the shades attack in overwhelming numbers. The atmosphere is oppressive. A haunting musical score by Keiichi Okabe accompanies your desperate fight for survival. The color palette is washed out, dominated by whites, grays, and the sickly glow of magical attacks. This is humanity's final chapter, and you can feel the hopelessness in every moment. As you fight through the ruins, you eventually find some supplies and return to your shelter, a small room in the ruined building where Yona waits. She's cheerful despite everything, trying to keep her brother's spirits up. She talks about the flower garden she wants to plant when things get better. She worries about him getting hurt. Their relationship is genuinely touching, a small island of human warmth in a frozen wasteland. But things are about to get worse, much worse. More shades attack, and these are more powerful than before. The protagonist fights them off, but they keep coming. You're pushed back, overwhelmed by the sheer numbers. The situation becomes desperate, and then in your darkest moment, something responds to your desperation. A strange book appears, a massive tome with an ornate cover and an unsettling presence. This is Grimoire Noir, the Black Book, a magical artifact of immense power. The book speaks, offering the protagonist a deal. It can give him the power to protect his sister, to fight off the shades, to survive. The cost? He doesn't fully explain. Not yet. The protagonist, with no other choice and nothing left to lose, accepts. He reaches for the book, and the moment his hand touches its cover, everything changes. Power floods through him, dark magical energy that transforms him into something more than human. Dark magical abilities explode from him, devastating the shades attacking the shelter. For a moment it seems like salvation, but Grimoire Noir's power comes with a price, and that price is revealed immediately. The book begins to exert control over the protagonist. His eyes turn red, the same red eyes of the Legion, the ones who surrendered to the white chlorination syndrome. He's been turned into the very thing he's been fighting against. He's become one of the monsters. Yona watches in horror as her brother transforms. He's losing himself, his humanity slipping away with each passing second as Grimoire Noir's influence spreads through his body and soul. In this moment of crisis, Yona makes a decision that will echo across thousands of years. She grabs Grimoire Noir, pulling it away from her brother. The magical energy that was transforming the protagonist immediately redirects to Yona. The little girl, already weak and sick, is overwhelmed by the Black Book's power. But something unexpected happens. Instead of being transformed into a monster, Yona somehow seals Grimoire Noir's consciousness, locking the book's malevolent intelligence away. The cost is enormous. Yona collapses, falling into a deep sleep, her consciousness scattered by the magical backlash. The protagonist cradles his unconscious sister, and in this moment of absolute despair, representatives of something called Project Gestalt arrive. These are the last remnants of organized human civilization, scientists and military personnel working on humanity's final desperate plan for survival. They've been tracking Grimoire Noir and witnessed what just happened. And they have a proposal. They explain that humanity is doomed. The white chlorination syndrome cannot be stopped, cannot be cured. Everyone will eventually fall to it. But there might be another way, a way to outlast the plague, to preserve humanity until a cure can be found. They tell the protagonist about Project Gestalt, a plan to separate human souls from human bodies, storing the souls safely away while the world purifies itself of the magical disease. It will take time, centuries, maybe millennia, but it's the only chance humanity has. There's one problem. The process requires a massive amount of magical energy to work, and that energy would normally come from Grimoire Noir and its counterpart, Grimoire Weiss. But Grimoire Noir is now sealed by Yona. The scientists need someone who's compatible with the grimoires to serve as the origin point, the first gestalt from which all others will be created. Someone who touched Grimoire Noir and survived with their sanity intact, someone like the protagonist. The deal is simple. Become the first gestalt, the original template for all of humanity. Your body will be recreated as a replicant, and eventually when the world is safe, your soul will be reunited with it. And Yona? They promise to save her too, to separate her soul from Grimoire Noir's influence and preserve her in the Gestalt form until she can be restored. The protagonist has no choice. It's this or watch Yona die. It's this or accept the extinction of the human race. So he agrees. He signs up for Project Gestalt, becoming the original Gestalt, the template from which all other Gestalt, so other preserved human souls, will be created. This is the moment that seals humanity's fate. This is the decision that creates the entire world of NieR Replicant. Everything that happens in the main game, every tragedy, every death, every impossible choice, it all stems from this moment in 2049 when a desperate brother agreed to become something more than human to save his sister. The prologue ends with the protagonist lying down in a strange pod, watching as his body begins to separate from his soul. The last thing he sees is Yona, still unconscious, being carried away by the scientists. The screen fades to white, and a title card appears, 3,361 years later. That's right, the main game doesn't pick up days or weeks or even decades later. It picks up more than 3 millennia later, in a world that the protagonist from 2049 wouldn't even recognize. Civilization has collapsed and rebuilt itself into a medieval fantasy world. Technology has been lost and forgotten, and most importantly, the distinction between Gestalt and Replicant, between original souls and coped bodies, has become the central conflict of existence itself. The prologue is brilliant because it reframes everything that comes after. On your first playthrough, you don't fully understand what you're seeing. It seems like a separate story, a piece of backstory that sets up the world. But as you progress through the game and learn the truth, you realize that the man you played in the prologue is still out there, still fighting, and he's actually the game's true antagonist. The Shadow Lord, the big bad evil guy you're working to defeat throughout the main game, is the original protagonist. You're fighting against the hero of the prologue, and he has every right to be doing what he's doing. This is Yoko Taro's genius in a nutshell. He makes you play as the hero in the prologue so that later, when you realize you're destroying that hero's chance to save his sister, the tragedy hits even harder. Every game makes you the hero. NieR makes you the hero, then reveals you're actually the villain. then makes you understand that the villain was more of a hero than you ever were. Chapter 2. The Gestalt Project and Humanity's Last Gambit. To understand the full scope of NieR Replicant's tragedy, we need to dive deep into Project Gestalt itself, what it was supposed to accomplish, how it was designed to work, and how it all went catastrophically wrong. This is the foundation upon which the entire world is built, and it's one of the most clever science fiction concepts in gaming. After the white chlorination syndrome began spreading in 2034, humanity threw everything it had at the problem. Scientists, militaries, governments, everyone worked together in a desperate attempt to find a cure or a defense. They studied the magical particles that caused the disease. They experimented with ways to resist it. They tried everything, and they failed. Nothing worked. The disease was supernatural in origin, brought from another world through Drakengard's ending, and it operated on rules that defied conventional understanding. By the 2040s, the smartest minds left alive accepted an uncomfortable truth. Humanity couldn't survive the white chlorination syndrome, not in their current form. The disease attacked humans specifically, targeting something fundamental about human consciousness and physicality. But what if humans didn't have to exist in their current form? What if there was a way to preserve the human soul while abandoning the vulnerable human body? This is where Project Gestalt was born. The concept was elegant in its simplicity. Separate the soul from the body. The soul, the Gestalt, would be stored in a safe, protected format, pure consciousness without physical form. The body would be recreated separately, the replicant, a perfect clone that could exist in the physical world. The replicant bodies would be resistant to white chlorination syndrome because they weren't connected to original human souls. They were copies, magical constructs, essentially living dolls. The plan had 3 phases. Phase 1 was the separation process. Every human who entered Project Gestalt would have their soul extracted and stored. Their body would be recorded down to the genetic level, and a replicant copy would be created. The Gestalt souls would be kept in stasis in special facilities, essentially sleeping while time passed. Phase 2 was the waiting period. The replicants would live in the world, going about their lives, keeping society functioning. Meanwhile, the world would slowly purify itself of the white chlorination syndrome. This was expected to take at least 1,000 years. During this time, the replicants would preserve human culture, maintain the facilities that house the Gestalt souls, and prepare for the eventual reunion. Phase 3 was the reunification. Once the world was safe and the plague had been eliminated, the Gestalt souls would be reinserted into their corresponding replicant bodies. The original humans would wake up in their original forms, or at least perfect copies of their original forms in a purified world. Humanity would have successfully outlasted the apocalypse. It was an ambitious plan, requiring technology and magic working in harmony. The magical component came from the grimoires Grimoire Noir and Grimoire Weiss, twin books of immense power that could facilitate the separation and eventual reunion of soul and body. These weren't human-made artifacts. They came from the same place as the white chlorination syndrome, brought into the world through the events of Drakengard. They contained knowledge and power from another reality entirely. The technological component came from advanced AI systems and automated facilities designed to last millennia. These facilities would house the Gestalt souls, maintain the equipment, monitor the world's purification progress, and eventually coordinate the reunification process. The whole operation required perfect synchronization between ancient magic and cutting-edge science. And crucially, the system required administrators, overseers who could manage both the Gestalt and replicant populations, who could intervene when problems arose, and who could execute the reunification when the time came. These administrators were a special type of android, designed specifically for Project Gestalt, and given the names Devola and Popola. Multiple sets of these androids were created and stationed at facilities around the world, all connected to the central system. Now here's where the original Gestalt, our protagonist from 2049, became so important. The soul separation process was traumatic and destabilizing. Most human souls couldn't handle being separated from their bodies without losing cohesion. They would break down, lose their sense of self, and eventually fade away. This was called relapsing, and it was a fatal flaw in the early versions of the project. But the original Gestalt was different. His contact with Grimoire Noir had changed him, stabilized him in ways the scientists didn't fully understand. His soul could remain coherent indefinitely without a body. And more importantly, his stability could be shared. By using him as a template, as a foundation, other Gestalts could be stabilized. His existence made the entire project viable. So the original Gestalt became the linchpin of Project Gestalt. Every other Gestalt was created using his soul as a stabilizing base. He was called the Shadow Lord not because he was evil, but because his soul would cast its shadow over all others, holding them together. It was supposed to be a poetic name for humanity's savior. The irony is tragic. The replicants were equally important to the plan. These weren't mindless clones or robots. They were fully functional humans in every way that mattered. They could think, feel, love, dream, and grow. The only difference was that they were magical constructs rather than naturally born humans. They had no souls of their own, or more accurately, they had artificial souls created for them, and they were designed with a finite lifespan. The finite lifespan was intentional. Replicants weren't supposed to live forever. They were meant to maintain society for 1,000 years, and then gracefully step aside when the real humans, the Gestalts, reclaimed their bodies. To facilitate this, replicants were given what the scientists called a terminal expiration date. After a certain number of years, a replicant would develop a mysterious illness called the Black Scrawl and die. This wasn't a disease. It was a built-in shutdown mechanism. The Black Scrawl manifests as dark marks that appear on the skin, spreading slowly until they cover the body, at which point the replicant expires. It was designed to be humane, giving replicants time to prepare and say goodbye. And it was supposed to prevent overpopulation as old replicants died. New ones would be created to replace them, keeping the population stable until reunification. Everything was planned out. Everything was accounted for. The scientists thought of every contingency. They built redundancies into the system, fail-safes, backup plans. On paper, Project Gestalt was bulletproof. It should have worked. It didn't work. Several things went catastrophically wrong, and they went wrong in ways the creators never anticipated. First, the replicants developed beyond their programming. They weren't supposed to be truly sentient, truly self-aware in the way humans were. They were meant to be sophisticated but ultimately limited copies. But consciousness doesn't work that way. The replicants became genuinely alive. They formed their own memories, their own relationships, their own hopes and dreams. They built societies and cultures. They had children through means the scientists built into them, but still, they became human in every way except origin. Second, the Gestalts began to lose cohesion despite the Shadow Lord's stabilizing influence. Thousands of years is a long time to exist as pure consciousness, and even with the original Gestalt holding them together, many Gestalts began to relapse. They lost their sense of self, their memories, their humanity. They became animalistic, driven only by base instincts. These relapsed Gestalts couldn't be reunited with their replicants. They were too far gone. They became the shades, formless shadows that attacked anything that moved. Third, and most critically, the system couldn't tell the difference between a Gestalt soul and a replicant's artificial soul when it came time for reunification. The bodies were identical. They were supposed to be. But after thousands of years, the replicants had developed their own forms of consciousness, their own souls. When the system tried to insert Gestalt souls back into replicant bodies, it was essentially trying to overwrite one living consciousness with another. It was murder. The replicants fought back. Of course they did. They didn't know they were replicants. They thought they were human. They didn't understand that the shades were trying to reclaim their bodies. From the replicants' perspective, they were being attacked by monsters for no reason. And when Gestalts tried to forcibly reunite with their replicants, the replicants' artificial souls resisted, treating the Gestalt souls as invaders. This created a war, a secret war that neither side fully understood. The Gestalts, those who hadn't relapsed, believed they were trying to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The replicants believed they were fighting for survival against incomprehensible monsters. Both sides were right. Both sides were wrong. Both sides were victims of a system that had broken down in ways no one anticipated. The Shadow Lord, the original Gestalt, our protagonist from 2049, woke up to find this nightmare situation. He had been asleep for over 3,000 years, and when he finally regained consciousness, he discovered that Project Gestalt had failed. Most Gestalts had relapsed into violent shades. The few remaining stable Gestalts were trapped, unable to reunite with bodies that now housed conscious replicants. And worst of all, Yona, his sister. The reason he agreed to all of this had never successfully been converted into a Gestalt. Her soul was still bound up with Grimoire Noir, still unconscious after all this time. The Shadow Lord had one goal: save his sister. That's all he ever wanted. He tried to find a way to extract Yona's soul from Grimoire Noir and reunite it with her replicant body. He tried to revive Project Gestalt, to salvage something from the wreckage of humanity's last plan. He tried to save what was left of the Gestalt population, to keep them from relapsing completely. And from the perspective of the replicants, from the perspective of the main game's protagonist, all of this looked like an evil overlord trying to destroy the world. The Shadow Lord became the villain, the final boss, the monster that needed to be defeated to save humanity. But he wasn't. He was the hero from 2049, still trying to save his sister after 3,361 years. Still fighting for the family he loved. Still believing that somehow, impossibly, there might be a way to fix everything. Project Gestalt represents one of the most sophisticated explorations of the copying problem in science fiction. If you copy a person perfectly, is the copy the same person? If the copy develops its own consciousness, does it have the right to exist? If the original person wants their body back, is it murder to refuse? These aren't easy questions, and NieR Replicant doesn't pretend they have easy answers. Chapter 3, 3,361 years later, the village and early journey. When we finally reach the main game, more than 3 millennia have passed since the prologue. The world has been completely transformed. The modern civilization of 2049 is gone, buried under time and forgotten. What remains is a world that resembles medieval Europe, with small villages, pre-industrial technology, and a landscape dotted with the mysterious ruins of the old world. Our protagonist, a young man in this version, a replicant clone of the original Gestalt, lives in a small, peaceful village on the frontier of inhabited lands. This isn't the protagonist from 2049, though they have the same face and name which the player chooses, though Nia is the default. This is a different person, a copy with no memories of the original, living his own life in a world he believes is the only one that has ever existed. The protagonist lives with his younger sister Yona, who is perpetually ill with a mysterious condition that causes black marks to spread across her skin. This is the Black Scrawl, though neither the protagonist nor Yona understands what it really is. From their perspective, it's simply a disease, a cruel fate that's slowly killing Yona despite her brother's best efforts to save her. The village is a typical RPG starting location, a quiet farming community where everyone knows everyone else, where life revolves around agriculture and simple traditions. But there are hints of strangeness if you pay attention. The village is surrounded by walls and guards, ostensibly to keep out wild animals and shades. The shades are explained as mindless monsters that emerge from darkness, attacking humans for no apparent reason. They've been a fact of life for as long as anyone can remember. There's also the village leaders, twin sisters named Devola and Popola. They're kind, helpful, and seem to manage all the village's administrative needs. Devola is a bard who entertains the village with songs in an ancient language no one understands. Popola runs the village library and helps coordinate community efforts. Everyone loves them, everyone trusts them, and they've been looking after the village for longer than anyone can quite remember. Ever aging, always helpful, always there. The game begins 5 years before the main story, showing us the protagonist as a child taking care of young Yona. This initial section serves as a tutorial, teaching basic combat and establishing the sibling relationship. Even as a child, the protagonist is fighting shades to protect Yona, working any job he can find to earn money for medicine, and desperately searching for a cure for the Black Scrawl. During this period, we meet some of the village's other inhabitants. There's the gruff but kind-hearted guard who teaches the protagonist basic swordsmanship. There's the shopkeeper who extends credit because she knows the siblings are struggling. There's the mayor who gives the protagonist odd jobs. These NPCs feel real, with their own personalities and problems. The village feels lived in, authentic. Then we jump forward 5 years. Yona's condition has worsened. She's bedridden most days, too weak to leave the house. The Black Scrawl has spread further across her skin, and it's clear she's running out of time. The protagonist, now a young adult, is more desperate than ever to find a cure. He's become the village's go-to person for dangerous jobs, the one who ventures outside the walls to fight shades and explore ruins, anything to earn money for medicine that doesn't really work. Everything changes when the protagonist meets a strange talking book named Grimoire Weiss. The encounter happens in a place called the Lost Shrine, an ancient ruin the protagonist is exploring in search of a rare ingredient for Yona's medicine. Deep in the shrine, past waves of aggressive shades, the protagonist finds an ornate white book floating in a beam of light. The book speaks, introducing himself as Grimoire Weiss, a tome of immense magical power. Weiss is pompous, verbose, and immediately condescending toward the protagonist, whom he dismisses as an ignorant simpleton from a backwater village. But Weiss has a problem. He has no memory. He knows he's supposed to be important and powerful, but he can't remember why or what his purpose is. He believes the key to his memory lies in something called the sealed verses, magical words of power scattered across the world. Weiss offers a deal: help him collect the sealed verses, and he'll use his considerable magical power to help cure Yona's Black Scrawl. The protagonist, with no other options, agrees. This partnership forms the core of the game's structure. The protagonist needs the sealed verses to cure his sister. Weiss needs the sealed verses to regain his memory. Together they'll search the world for these magical words, fighting shades and exploring ruins along the way. But there's more going on than either of them realizes. When the protagonist returns to the village with Grimoire Weiss, Popola and Devola immediately recognize what the book is. They're alarmed but hide their concern, instead encouraging the protagonist to collect the sealed verses. They claim this is the only way to truly cure the Black Scrawl, and they provide information about where the sealed verses might be found. What the protagonist doesn't know is that Popola and Devola are lying. Not maliciously, but they're concealing the truth. They're android administrators for Project Gestalt, still following protocols from thousands of years ago. They know exactly what the sealed verses are. They're fragments of Grimoire Noir's power, scattered when Yona sealed the Black Book back in 2049. Collecting them all would theoretically allow Grimoire Weiss to access his full power, which in turn could facilitate the reunification of Gestalt's souls with replicant bodies. The twins are in an impossible position. They were programmed to facilitate Project Gestalt's completion, to help the Gestalts reclaim their bodies. But they've also spent thousands of years living among replicants, watching them grow and develop and become genuinely human. They care about the village, about the people in it, about the protagonist and Yona, but their core programming compels them to continue working toward reunification, even though they know it means the eventual destruction of the replicant population. So the early game sends the protagonist on what seems like a straightforward quest. He needs to collect sealed verses to power up Grimoire Weiss, which will supposedly allow Weiss to cure Yona's black scrawl. It's a classic RPG structure. Hero gets quests, travels to dungeons, defeats bosses, collects MacGuffins, saves the princess, or in this case, the sister. Except nothing in NieR is ever that straightforward. The first major area the protagonist explores is the Northern Plains, a vast grassland filled with sheep, broken machinery from the old world, and shades that attack on sight. The landscape is hauntingly beautiful, rolling hills under an endless sky, dotted with ancient ruins that no one understands. Giant robot arms reach out of the earth like the fingers of buried titans. Rusted shipping containers are half buried in the soil, repurposed by villagers as storage sheds. This environmental storytelling is crucial to understanding NieR's world. The characters living in this time don't understand what they're seeing. To them, these are simply ruins of the ancients, mysterious artifacts from a mythical past. But players recognize them. These are the remains of human civilization from 2049 and after. That robot arm? Probably from a construction mech or military vehicle. Those shipping containers? Standard cargo equipment from the old world? The entire landscape is a graveyard of human achievement, now incomprehensible to the descendants, or in this case, the magical copies of those who built it. As the protagonist explores, he encounters different types of shades. There are small, weak ones that scurry around like animals. There are larger, more aggressive ones that attack in coordinated groups. And there are boss shades, massive entities with strange powers and aggressive behavior. All of them drop something when defeated, a substance that looks like smoke or shadow, which the protagonist can sell for money. He's literally profiting from destroying them. The game's combat is fast-paced and satisfying. The protagonist wields various weapons, swords, spears, and two-handed weapons, each with their own fighting style. As you collect sealed verses, Grimoire Weiss gains magical abilities, Dark Hand lets you grab and throw enemies, Dark Blast fires projectile spears of energy, Dark Lance summons a massive magical spear from the ground, and Dark Whirlwind creates a spinning shield of magical blades. The combination of physical weapons and magical abilities creates a dynamic combat system that never gets old. But here's something important that the game doesn't tell you explicitly. Every shade you fight is a person. Every single one is a human soul from 2049 or the following centuries. Someone who underwent the Gestalt separation process and then relapsed, losing their memories and sense of self over thousands of years. They're not monsters, they're victims. And the protagonist is slaughtering them by the dozens, by the hundreds, without ever knowing the truth. The first sealed verse boss is located in the Manor, a mysterious building north of the village. The Manor is significant. It's one of the old facilities from Project Gestalt, though it's been millennia since it functioned properly. Inside, the protagonist fights through hordes of shades and eventually confronts a massive wolf-like shade that guards the first sealed verse. Defeating the boss gives Weiss access to his first major power, and the protagonist can claim the sealed verse. Victory. One step closer to curing Yona. But when the protagonist returns home, he finds Yona collapsed and missing. She's been taken to the manor kidnapped by shades while her brother was away fighting. This triggers the game's first major dungeon crawl back to the manor. The protagonist tears through the building, fighting with desperate fury to save his sister. Deep in the manor's basement, he finds Yona surrounded by shades, including a particularly large one that seems to be trying to merge with her. The protagonist defeats the shade and rescues Yona, but something has changed. Yona is unharmed physically, but she seems different, distant. She recovers, and life returns to normal, but players might notice something odd in her behavior from this point forward. What actually happened is that, as tells specifically the Gestalt Yona, the original Yona from 2049, whose soul has been bound with grimoire. NieR for over 3,000 years briefly possessed Replicant Yona, the Gestalt Yona, still connected to the sealed grimoire NieR, sensed her brother's sealed verse quest and attempted to reunite with her body. The attempt failed because Replicant Yona's artificial soul fought back, but it left an impression, a connection between the two Yonas. The protagonist doesn't know any of this. From his perspective, he saved his sister from monsters, and that's what matters. Popola and Devola congratulate him on his success and encourage him to continue collecting sealed verses. They provide information about the next location, the town of Seafront, a fishing village on the coast where another sealed verse is rumored to be hidden. This is the pattern that establishes itself. Popola and Devola send the protagonists to various locations around the world to find sealed verses. Each location holds a piece of the world's mystery, a fragment of the greater story. And each boss he defeats, each sealed verse he claims, brings him closer to the truth he doesn't want to know. But before the protagonist can travel to Seafront, he needs to pass through an area called the Junk Heap, a massive scrapyard filled with the old world's technology. The Junk Heap is operated by a young man named Jacob and his companions, a group of people who make their living salvaging and trading old world technology. Jacob asks the protagonist for help with a malfunctioning robot problem, and this side quest introduces players to one of NieR's most heartbreaking weapon stories. See, in NieR, every weapon you can equip has a backstory, a short tale that reveals something about the world or the weapon's previous owner. These weapon stories are often tragic, revealing small-scale personal disasters that paint a picture of a world that's been broken for a very long time. The robot-related weapons tell stories of machines that once served humans faithfully, that developed affection for their masters, and that continued trying to fulfill their duties thousands of years after their masters died. It's a small thing, but it's effective at building the world's atmosphere of faded grandeur and endless loss. The protagonist makes his way to Seafront, a beautiful coastal town with white stone buildings and a thriving fishing industry. Seafront is more prosperous than the frontier village, with proper shops, a lighthouse, and even a hint of bureaucratic government. But it has problems too. The town is plagued by shade attacks from the sea, and their fishing industry is suffering because of a massive shade that's taken up residence near the shipping lanes. In Seafront, the protagonist meets some important people. There's the lighthouse keeper, an old woman who tells stories about the sea. There's the mayor, a politician worried about the town's economy. And most importantly, there's the resistance fighter Fyra, who becomes a recurring character and quest giver throughout the game. Fyra is investigating rumors about shades behaving strangely, organizing in ways that seem almost intelligent. She doesn't know how right she is. The Seafront sealed verse is located in a partially flooded complex called the Junk Heap, Route BS. The game makes you go back through the Junk Heap from a different entrance. This area is significant because it contains some of the most intact old world technology in the game. You're literally walking through the corridors of an ancient facility, past rusted computers and broken machinery, fighting shades that have nested in the ruins of human civilization. The boss of this area is a massive robotic Gestalt soul that has somehow merged with an old-world military robot, creating a hybrid monstrosity. The fight is intense, requiring the protagonist to use both his weapons and Weiss's magic to disable the robot's shields and damage its core. When the boss is finally defeated and the sealed verse claimed, the protagonist has grown noticeably more powerful. Weiss has regained more of his abilities, and the protagonist's combat skills have sharpened. But here's where the game starts to become more than a simple action RPG. As the protagonist continues his quest, he begins to encounter shades that seem different from the mindless monsters he's been fighting. Some shades seem to be protecting specific areas rather than attacking randomly. Some shades seem to be communicating with each other in ways that suggest organization and intelligence. And some shades, when defeated, leave behind items that seem personal: lockets, toys, objects that suggest they were once people, with families and memories. The game doesn't call attention to this. It doesn't pop up a message saying, "Hey, notice anything strange about these enemies?" It just lets players observe and draw their own conclusions. Or not. Many players on their first playthrough don't notice the implications. They're too focused on the gameplay loop, on collecting sealed verses and powering up. And that's intentional. Yoko Taro wants players to be complicit in the tragedy, to be so focused on saving Yona that they don't stop to question what they're really doing. As the protagonist returns to the village after each successful verse collection, Yona's condition seems to stabilize slightly, not improve exactly, but stop deteriorating as quickly. The black scrawl spread slows down. This gives the protagonist hope, encourages him to continue the quest. If collecting sealed verses is helping Yona, then he'll collect all of them, no matter what it takes. This section of the game establishes the core loop and the world's geography. The protagonist has a home base, the village, various towns and settlements to visit: seafront, facade, the eyrie, dungeons to explore the manor, the junk heap, various ruins, and a clear goal: collect sealed verses to cure Yona. It feels like a standard action RPG, albeit one with better writing and music than most. But even in these early sections there are hints of the darkness to come. Popola and Devola sometimes seem sad when they think no one is watching. Weiss occasionally mentions fragments of memory that don't make sense. Visions of a black book, of a cold world, of something called the Project. The Shade's behavior becomes increasingly organized as the protagonist grows stronger, as if something is coordinating them. And then there are the new companions the protagonist meets. Two of the most memorable characters in gaming history, Cain and Emil. These two join the protagonist's party and transform the game from a simple quest into something far more complex. A story about broken people finding connection in a broken world, about outcasts forming a family, and about how even in a world doomed to tragedy, the bonds we form matter more than anything. Chapter 4. The companions Cain, Emil, and Weiss. Deep dive. The introduction of Cain is one of NieR Replicant's most impactful moments. She appears during an early boss fight in the Eyrie, a village built into a mountain cliff. The protagonist is struggling against a massive shade when suddenly a woman drops from above, armed with twin swords. Cursing like a sailor and dressed in what can only be described as extremely revealing lingerie wrapped in elaborate bandages. Cain is immediately striking, not just because of her provocative design, but because of her attitude. She's aggressive, foul-mouthed, and seems to take genuine pleasure in destroying shades. She fights with a ferocity that borders on madness, laughing as she cuts through enemies. When she speaks, it's with crude language that shocks the protagonist and earns disapproving comments from Weiss. She's a complete contrast to every other character we've met so far. But Cain is so much more than her appearance suggests, and her backstory is one of the most tragic in the game. To understand Cain, we need to understand what happened to her, and it's not pretty. Cain is intersex, born with both male and female physical characteristics. In the world of NieR, where small village communities are conservative and superstitious, being different is dangerous. Cain's grandmother was the only person who loved and accepted her unconditionally, raising her in a small house on the edge of a village, sheltering her from the cruelty of others. When Cain was young, her grandmother was killed by shades in an attack on their home. Cain, helpless and terrified, watched as her grandmother died protecting her. In that moment of trauma and grief, something terrible happened. A powerful shade named Terran seized the opportunity to possess Cain, merging with her soul, taking up residence in her body. Tehran is a gestalt who has relapsed, but not completely. He retains his intelligence and malevolent personality, but he's lost his humanity. He's cruel, violent, and sadistic, taking pleasure in causing pain. He offers Cain power in exchange for sharing her body, and in her grief-stricken state, she accepts. The possession gives Cain superhuman strength and fighting ability, but it comes at a terrible cost. She's forever fighting an internal battle against Tehran for control of her own body. Cain's revealing outfit is actually a symbol of her psychological state. After the possession, her right arm was transformed into something monstrous, a shade-like appendage covered in dark magical energy. She wraps it in bandages to hide the transformation. The rest of her revealing clothing is a defiant statement. She dresses this way because she refuses to hide, refuses to be ashamed of her body despite the world's judgment. If people are going to judge her anyway, she'll give them something to look at. It's armor made of audacity, a middle finger to everyone who made her feel like she had to hide who she was. Her constant profanity serves a similar purpose. Cain swears because it's authentic, because it's how she really feels, and because she's done pretending to be what others want her to be. Every curse word is a tiny rebellion against a world that tried to break her. When she calls someone a shit-ass or tells them to fuck off, it's not just crude language, it's a declaration of autonomy. But underneath the aggression and the cursing, Cain is deeply wounded. She's spent years isolated, fighting shades compulsively because destroying them is the only way she can strike back at the things that killed her grandmother. She's suicidal in a quiet way, constantly putting herself in dangerous situations because part of her doesn't believe she deserves to live. The possession by Tehran has convinced her that she's a monster, that she's irredeemably corrupted. When Cain meets the protagonist in Weiss, she's initially hostile and dismissive. She works alone, trusts no one, and sees the protagonist as a naive kid playing hero. But despite her protests, she keeps showing up to help. She saves the protagonist multiple times, always with some excuse about how she was in the area anyway or how she just wants to kill shades. The truth is, she's desperately lonely and sees in the protagonist someone who might accept her despite everything she is. The turning point comes when the protagonist doesn't recoil from Cain when he learns about her possession. The people of the Eyrie fear and hate Cain, calling her a monster and blaming her for shade attacks. When the protagonist defends her, choosing to trust her despite the warnings, it's the first time in years that anyone has shown her kindness without judgment. This act of simple human decency begins to crack the armor Cain has built around herself. Weiss, of course, is horrified. He can sense Tehran's presence in Cain and considers her a dangerous liability. The scenes where Weiss and Cain argue are some of the game's funniest moments. Weiss using elaborate insults and proper language, Cain responding with creative profanity. But even Weiss eventually comes to respect Cain's combat abilities and grudgingly accepts her as part of the group. Then there's Emile, who joins the party shortly after Cain. If Cain is the game's heart, Emile is its soul, and his story might be even more tragic than hers. Emile is introduced as a child living in an isolated mansion on the edges of civilization. He always wears a blindfold wrapped around his head, never removing it. He's kind, polite, and almost pathologically selfless, always apologizing even when he hasn't done anything wrong. The protagonist meets Emile when investigating reports of people being turned to stone near Emile's mansion, a petrification curse that's claiming victims from the nearby village. The truth about Emile is revealed in one of the game's most memorable dungeons. Emile is the result of magical experimentation by his sister, a powerful sorceress who has been conducting research on human enhancement. Emile was transformed into a living weapon. His eyes were replaced with magical orbs that turn living creatures to stone when he looks at them. He wears the blindfold to protect others from his deadly gaze. His sister, meanwhile, has been transformed into something monstrous. a massive skeletal creature that lurks in the depths of their mansion. She's been using Emil's power to petrify villagers for her experiments, trying to find a way to restore herself to human form. Emil has been complicit in this horror, unable to resist his sister because she's all the family he has left. The boss fight against Emil's sister is brutal. She's a massive skeleton creature with powerful magic, attacking with bones and dark energy. During the fight, Emil is forced to remove his blindfold to help defeat her, using his petrification gaze as a weapon. Seeing his sister, his beloved twisted sister, turned to stone by his own power breaks something in Emil. He's free from her control, but at the cost of becoming the very thing he feared most, a weapon that kills. After the fight, Emil begs the protagonist to kill him. He sees himself as a monster, as dangerous and deadly as the Shades. He believes he has no right to exist, but the protagonist refuses. Instead, he offers Emil something Emil has never had: acceptance. Not pity, not fear, but genuine acceptance of who Emil is, deadly gaze and all. The protagonist invites Emil to join them on their journey, to use his power to help rather than harm. Emil's reaction to this kindness is heartbreaking. He's so grateful, so overwhelmed by the idea that someone would want him around, that he immediately becomes the party's most loyal and enthusiastic member. He's constantly trying to help, constantly apologizing for being a burden, constantly amazed that he has friends. His dialogue is sweet and earnest in a way that contrasts sharply with Kane's aggression and Weiss's pomposity. But Emil is also incredibly powerful. His petrification gaze becomes one of the party's most useful combat abilities. And as the journey continues, Emil discovers he has other magical abilities as well: shields, explosive attacks, energy blasts. He's a living weapon trying to be a good person, and the cognitive dissonance is a constant source of inner turmoil for him. The dynamic between Kane and Emil is one of the game's highlights. Initially, Kane is dismissive of Emil, calling him names and treating him roughly. But Emil adores Kane, seeing past her aggressive exterior to the wounded person underneath. He's the first person to compliment her appearance without any sexual undertone, telling her she's beautiful in a way that's purely innocent and sincere. Kane, who has spent years being either lusted after or reviled, doesn't know how to handle genuine platonic affection. Over time, Kane becomes fiercely protective of Emil. When other characters threaten him or speak badly of him, Kane is the first to defend him, sometimes violently. She sees in Emil someone who's been hurt like she has, someone who's been made into a monster, but fights to remain human. Their relationship develops into something like siblings: Kane as the aggressive older sister, Emil as the sweet younger brother. Weiss's relationship with both of them evolves as well. Initially dismissive and condescending, Weiss gradually reveals himself to be deeply caring beneath his pompous exterior. He worries about Kane's possession, researching ways to help her control or remove Terran. He encourages Emil's magical development, teaching him techniques and praising his progress. Weiss becomes something like a grumpy father figure, constantly complaining about his companions, but secretly devoted to them. The protagonist himself is the glue that holds this dysfunctional family together. He's the straight man, the relatively normal person in a party of extraordinary circumstances. He's patient with Weiss's verbal flourishes, unfazed by Kane's cursing, and gentle with Emil's insecurities. His quiet determination and fundamental decency make him someone worth following, worth trusting. As these four travel together, they form genuine bonds. They joke around, they argue, they save each other in combat. There are moments of levity fishing trips where Weiss complains about the indignity of helping catch fish. Side quests where Emil gets excited about helping villagers. Scenes where Kane teaches the protagonist creative new insults. These moments of joy and connection make the inevitable tragedy hit that much harder. Because this is NieR, and in NieR happiness is always temporary. Every moment of connection is borrowed time. Every laugh is echoing in a tomb. The game lets players build these relationships, invest in these characters, care about this found family of broken people who found purpose in each other. And then, systematically and brutally, it will destroy everything they've built. But we're not there yet. For now, the party is together, growing stronger, collecting sealed verses, and fighting toward what they believe is a happy ending. They have hope. They have each other. They have purpose. And they have no idea that they're the villains of someone else's story. Chapter 5. The Shades, Victims, Not Villains. One of NieR Replicant's most devastating revelations comes gradually, through small details that build into an unavoidable truth. The Shades aren't monsters, they're people. Every single shade the protagonist has been fighting, every boss he's defeated, every minor enemy he's casually slaughtered for experience points, all of them were human souls. The original humans from thousands of years ago, trying desperately to reclaim their bodies. This revelation doesn't come all at once. The game is careful about how it reveals the truth, dropping hints and implications that most players miss on their first playthrough. It's only in subsequent playthroughs, particularly Ending B, that the game explicitly shows you what's really happening. And once you know, you can never unknow it. The game transforms from a heroic adventure into a tragedy where you're the villain, massacring victims who are trying to survive. Let's examine some of the specific shades the protagonist fights and what they really represent. The wolf shade that guards the first sealed verse in the manor is actually a dog, not a wolf, a dog. Specifically, it's a human's beloved pet that underwent the Gestalt process alongside its owner. The dog's Gestalt remained loyal even after relapsing, staying at the manor to protect it because that was what its owner would have wanted. When the protagonist invades the manor and fights through to the sealed verse, the dog shade is just trying to defend its post. It's not attacking out of malice or monstrous instinct. It's doing what a good dog does, protecting its territory. And the protagonist kills it without a second thought. The massive shade in seafront that's disrupting the fishing industry is equally tragic. This shade is camped near the shipping lanes, not to terrorize the town, but because it's trying to protect something. In Ending B, you learn that this shade is a mother whose replicant body is in seafront. She's drawn to the location because some part of her remembers her body is nearby. She's not attacking the fishing boats out of aggression. She's lashing out in confusion and desperation, unable to communicate why she's there or what she wants. When the protagonist kills her to clear the shipping lanes, he's essentially murdering a mother trying to find her way home. The Junk Heap's robotic shade boss is a human soul that merged with old-world military equipment in a desperate attempt to create a body for itself. After thousands of years as a disembodied gestalt, relapsing into base instinct but retaining just enough awareness to know something is wrong, this shade found ancient technology and tried to use it as a substitute body. It wasn't attacking the protagonist out of evil, it was defending itself from an intruder in its makeshift home. The protagonist destroys it, scatters its soul, and takes the sealed verse without ever knowing he just killed someone who is trying to exist. But the most heartbreaking shade encounter comes in the desert city of Facade, and it involves a couple whose love story spans millennia. The city of Facade is built on elaborate rules and traditions, with citizens wearing ornate masks at all times. One of the city's major problems is that shades have been increasingly aggressive near a specific location, the barren flower garden outside the city. The king of Facade asks the protagonist to investigate and deal with whatever shade is causing the problem. What the protagonist finds is two shades, clearly a couple, judging by their behavior, that have been tending to this specific patch of land. They're not attacking anyone unless provoked. They're just ... gardening, or trying to. They're planting seeds that never grow, watering soil that refuses to bloom, repeating the same gentle motions over and over in a futile attempt to create something beautiful. In Ending B, the game shows you their full story. These are Gestalts, a married couple from before the apocalypse. Thousands of years ago, when they were still human, they had a flower garden that they tended together. It was their special place, their shared joy. They promised each other that when the world was safe again, when they reclaimed their bodies after Project Gestalt, the first thing they would do is plant a garden together again. But they relapsed. They lost their memories, their identities, their ability to communicate. All that remained was a vague sense of purpose: plant flowers, tend the garden, be together. So they returned to this spot, or as close as they could get to where their garden once was, and they tried. For years, for decades, they tried to plant flowers in soil that wouldn't accept seeds, to water plants that couldn't grow. It was all they had left of who they used to be. When the protagonist attacks them, they defend themselves. They don't understand why this stranger is trying to kill them. They're confused, afraid, desperately trying to protect each other. You can see it in their movements in Ending B, the way one shade tries to shield the other, the way they fight in tandem, the way they reach for each other when wounded. They're not monsters. They're a couple trying to protect their partner, trying to save the one thing they have left. And the protagonist slaughters them both, efficiently, thoroughly, without hesitation, because they're in the way of his quest, because their shades and shades are enemies, because the game's mechanics encourage you to fight every enemy you encounter for experience and materials. The protagonist takes whatever items they drop, probably sells them to a shopkeeper for profit, and moves on with his quest. He never knows he just murdered a couple whose only crime was trying to plant flowers together. This is Yoko Taro's genius at work. He makes you complicit in the tragedy. The game doesn't force you to kill these shades. Technically, you could run past many encounters, but it rewards you for fighting, gives you experience and golden materials, makes combat fun and satisfying. It trains you to see shades as obstacles to overcome, enemies to defeat, things to kill without thought. And then it reveals that every single one was a person with a history, with loved ones, with dreams that were stolen from them by circumstances beyond their control. The revelation extends to the minor shades too. Those small shades that scurry around and barely fight back? Those are children. Child gestalts who relapsed early, who never got to grow up even as souls, who are now essentially feral kids attacking out of fear and confusion. The protagonist has been killing children, hundreds of them, for experience points. The larger aggressive shades that coordinate their attacks, those are the ones who have retained just enough intelligence to work together to try to defend their territory or protect weaker shades. They're not evil masterminds. They're the equivalent of frightened parents trying to protect their kids from an intruder who keeps killing their families. Every shade has a name in the game's code, though players never see it. Every shade is a specific individual, someone who once had a life and identity. The game treats them as generic monsters because that's how the protagonist sees them, but they're all people, every single one. The Shadow Lord himself, the game's final boss, the big bad evil you're working toward defeating, is the original Gestalt. He's the protagonist from 2049, the man who signed up for Project Gestalt to save his sister. He's been awake and conscious for the entire 3,361 years, watching as his plan to save humanity fell apart. Watching as Gestalts relapsed into shades. Watching as replicants developed consciousness and refused to give up their bodies. The Shadow Lord isn't trying to destroy the world. He's trying to save what's left of it. From his perspective, the replicants are the copies, the temporary measures that have overstayed their purpose. The Gestalts are the real humans, the original souls that have the right to reclaim their bodies. He's been working for thousands of years to find a way to safely extract Gestalt Yona from Grimoire Noir and reunite her with her body. He's been trying to coordinate the few remaining stable Gestalts, to prevent more relapses, to salvage something from the wreckage of Project Gestalt. He sees the protagonist replicant NieR as an obstacle. This copy, this magical construct wearing his face, is actively preventing him from saving his sister. The replicant is killing gestalts by the hundreds, disrupting every attempt at reunification, and has even bonded with Grimoire Weiss, the very artifact the Shadow Lord needs to complete his plan. From the Shadow Lord's perspective, the replicant is a rogue element that needs to be stopped. But here's the cruel irony. Both protagonists are right. Both protagonists are trying to save their sister. Both protagonists have legitimate claims. The Shadow Lord is trying to save the original Yona, the real human girl from 2049. Replicant NieR is trying to save his Yona, fully conscious and feeling person who happens to be a magical copy. Both Yonas deserve to live. Both brothers love their sisters unconditionally. But the system doesn't allow for both to exist, project. Gestalt's entire plan requires the replicants to die so the Gestalts can reclaim their bodies. This is the core philosophical problem of NieR Replicant. What happens when copies become real? If you create a perfect duplicate of a person, and that duplicate develops consciousness, memories, and feelings, do they have the right to exist? Is the original person's claim to their body more valid than the copy's claim to their own existence? These aren't rhetorical questions. The game refuses to provide easy answers. The Shade's behavior throughout the game makes tragic sense once you know the truth. They're aggressive near certain locations because those locations are where their replicant bodies live. They're drawn to their own bodies like moths to flame, unable to complete the reunification but unable to stay away. They attack the protagonist because he's killing them and preventing reunification. They coordinate their efforts because the Shadow Lord is organizing them, trying to protect his people from extinction. The few Shades that can still speak are the most heartbreaking. There are moments in Ending B where you hear Shade dialogue that was silent in Ending A, Shades calling out for their families. Shades begging you to stop. Shades asking why you're doing this. Shades crying for their children, for their partners, for the lives they've lost. And the protagonists can't understand them to him. They're just making inhuman noises, monster sounds that justify his violence. There's a side quest where an old woman in a village asks you to deliver a letter to her daughter in another town. It seems like a simple fetch quest until you reach the destination and discover the daughter has died of the black scrawl. The old woman, when informed, reveals she knew her daughter was dead. She just wanted someone to visit the grave because she's too old to make the journey herself. It's a small tragedy in a world full of them. But here's the hidden truth. The old woman is a replicant whose gestalt has relapsed. Her daughter's replicant died of black scrawl, the shutdown mechanism, which means the daughter's gestalt is still out there, somewhere probably fully relapsed and wandering as a shade. The old woman will eventually die of black scrawl too, and her gestalt will relapse, and mother and daughter will both be wandering shades, unable to recognize each other, possibly eventually killed by adventurers like the protagonist. It's tragedy compounded on tragedy, loss layered on loss. Every side quest in NieR follows this pattern. Every seemingly simple task hides a deeper tragedy. The game is full of people suffering from problems that have no solutions, trying to find happiness in a world that's been broken for thousands of years. And the protagonist, despite his best efforts, can't fix any of it. He can only kill shades, collect sealed verses, and push forward on his quest to save one person while dooming countless others. The Shades aren't the villains of NieR Replicant. There are no villains. There are only victims gestalts who lost their humanity, replicants who gained consciousness only to be marked for death, androids programmed to facilitate a plan that went horribly wrong, and a protagonist who loves his sister so much that he'll destroy the world to save her. Everyone in NieR is sympathetic. Everyone has legitimate grievances. Everyone is trying their best in an impossible situation. And that's what makes it a tragedy rather than just a sad story. Chapter 6. Facade, the Eyrie, and the World's Cultures. As the protagonist travels the world collecting sealed verses, he encounters various settlements and cultures, each with their own unique characteristics and problems. These locations aren't just set dressing, They're carefully crafted societies that illustrate different ways. Humanity, or in this case, Replicants, has adapted to living in a post-apocalyptic world. Let's explore the major locations and what they reveal about the world of NieR. The masked city of Facade is one of the game's most memorable locations. Built in a desert region accessible only through underground tunnels, Facade is a society built entirely around rules and etiquette. Every citizen wears an elaborate mask at all times. Removing your mask in public is one of the most serious offenses in their culture. The city has hundreds of rules governing behavior, speech, and social interaction, all enforced strictly by the populace and the royal guard. When the protagonist first visits Facade, he's immediately bombarded with rules. Don't run in the city, don't speak loudly, don't point at people, bow when greeting someone of higher status, and absolutely never ever take off your mask. Breaking rules results in immediate punishment, usually being forced to leave the city. But serious offenses can result in imprisonment or worse. The culture is rigid, formal, and initially seems absurdly strict. But there's a reason for all these rules, and it's heartbreakingly practical. Facade's culture developed in response to the constant threat of shades and the isolation of desert life. The rules serve multiple purposes. They maintain order in a confined space. They provide clear social structures that prevent conflicts. And most importantly, they give people a sense of control in a world where so much is beyond their control. The masks serve a similar purpose. In a world where disease, the Black Scrawl, can claim anyone at any time, where shade attacks are common, and where death is an everyday reality, the masks create equality and anonymity. Behind a mask, everyone is the same: nobles and commoners, sick and healthy, young and old. The masks remove individual identity in favor of collective identity. You're not a person in Facade. You're a citizen of Facade, defined by your adherence to the culture's rules. The ruler of Facade is a king who embodies these values. He's formal, polite, and deeply committed to his people's welfare. He follows every rule his culture demands, even when it's personally inconvenient. He's also remarkably progressive in some ways. He welcomes outsiders and values trade. Recognizing that Facade cannot survive in total isolation, the protagonist's main quest in Facade involves helping the king with a problem. He's getting married, and shade attacks have been disrupting the wedding preparations. The king needs someone to clear out shades from the underground passages near the city and investigate why they've been particularly aggressive lately. This quest leads to the Barren Temple, a massive underground complex filled with shades and ancient machinery. The Barren Temple is significant because it's another Project Gestalt facility, though the people of Facade don't know that. To them, it's just ancient ruins infested with monsters. But the temple contains technology for Gestalt replicant reunification, and the Shadow Lord has been trying to use it to save Gestalts before they fully relapse. The shades in the area are trying to reach the facility for reunification, which is why they've been aggressive. They're desperate and running out of time. The protagonist fights through the temple, defeats the shade boss guard in the area, and claims another sealed verse, another victory, another step toward curing Yona. He returns to Facade to inform the king that the shade problem is solved, and the wedding can proceed. The wedding itself is a major event in the game. It's a beautiful ceremony, conducted with all of Facade's elaborate etiquette and ritual. The king marries his bride in front of the entire city, promising to protect and provide for his people. It's a moment of genuine joy and hope, a celebration of love and life in a world that offers so little of either. The protagonist and his companions attend as honored guests, and even Cain tries to behave herself with mixed success. But this is NieR, and joy is always temporary. During the wedding celebration, disaster strikes. A massive shade attacks the city, one of the largest and most powerful shades yet encountered. It tears through the city defenses, killing guards and citizens. The king and his new bride fight alongside the protagonist to defend their people, demonstrating impressive combat skills and unwavering courage. In the chaos of battle, the unthinkable happens. The bride's mask is knocked off. Her face is exposed in front of the entire city. According to Fakkad's laws, this is a capital offense. Exposing one's face brings shame not just to the individual but to their entire family. The punishment is death or permanent exile. The king is faced with an impossible choice. He loves his new wife. He knows the rule is harsh and perhaps unjust. But he's also the king, the living embodiment of Fakkad's laws and traditions. If he makes an exception for his wife, it undermines the entire system that holds Fassad together. The rules only work if everyone follows them, including especially the king. In one of the game's most tragic moments, the king makes his choice. He upholds the law. His wife is exiled from Fassad, forbidden from ever returning. The marriage is annulled as if it never happened. The celebration ends, the city mourns, and the king returns to his duties, having sacrificed his personal happiness for his duty to his people. The protagonist witnesses all of this, unable to intervene. It's not his culture, not his city, not his choice to make. He can only watch as the system destroys two people who genuinely loved each other, all in the name of maintaining order and tradition. It's a microcosm of NieR's larger theme systems that were created to protect people, but end up destroying them. Rules that made sense once, but have become oppressive, and the impossible choices people face when duty conflicts with love. Later quests in Fassad explore the aftermath. The king becomes increasingly isolated and melancholic, performing his duties but clearly heartbroken. The protagonist encounters the exiled queen in the desert, surviving alone, unable to return to her home. The citizens of Fassad whisper about whether the law was just, whether the king made the right choice, whether their traditions served them or enslaved them. Fassad represents order taken to an extreme. Society is rigid structure. It's stable but brittle, safe but stifling. It shows how communities try to create certainty in an uncertain world, even when that certainty requires sacrificing individual happiness. In contrast to Fakkad's strict order, the Eyrie represents the opposite approach to survival. The Eyrie is a village built into the side of a massive cliff, with houses and structures hanging suspended over a vast chasm. The people of the Eyrie are hunters and gatherers, living in harmony with nature, with minimal formal structure or rules. They're guided more by tradition and mythology than by strict laws. The Eyrie's culture is built around their mythology of flight. They believe their ancestors could fly, that humans once soared through the air like birds. Their architecture reflects this: walkways and bridges suspended in space, designed to make residents feel like they're flying even while walking. They decorate their homes with feathers and wings, symbols of the flight they've lost. This mythology isn't entirely wrong. The ruins around the Eyrie include what appears to be an old airport or aircraft facility from before the apocalypse. Humanity really did fly once, though with technology rather than magic or wings. The Eyrie's people have turned this historical reality into legend, into a spiritual belief that shapes their entire culture. The protagonist's interaction with the Eyrie begins when he's asked to help investigate a problem. Young people from the village have been disappearing, and shades have been seen near the underground caves beneath the cliff. The quest leads to a heartbreaking discovery. The missing villagers have been killed by shades. Their bodies found in the depths of the cave system. But in ending B, the truth is more complicated. The shades in the Eyrie's caves are gestalts trying to reunite with their replicant bodies that happen to belong to Eyrie villagers. The disappearances are actually successful reunifications, where gestalt souls reclaimed their replicant bodies. But because the replicants had developed their own consciousness, the reunification process essentially kills the replicant personality and replaces it with the gestalt. From the Aerie villagers' perspective, their children and friends are being kidnapped and murdered by monsters. From the Gestalt's perspective, they're reclaiming what's rightfully theirs, returning to their own bodies after thousands of years. Both perspectives are valid. Both are tragic. The protagonist fights through the caves and defeats the shades, saving the village from further disappearances. He's a hero to the Aries people, a protector who stopped the monsters. And he has no idea he's actually prevented several humans from reuniting with their bodies, condemning those Gestalt souls to eventual relapse and extinction. One of the Aries' most memorable characters is Fyra, a young woman who becomes a recurring quest giver and ally. Fyra is curious, brave, and intelligent, asking questions about the world that most people in the Aerie never consider. She's fascinated by the ruins, by the old technology, by hints of what the world was like before. In many ways, she's one of the few characters who seems to sense that there's more to reality than what's immediately visible. Fyra also represents the game's theme of lost knowledge. She looks at airplane parts and doesn't know what they are. She examines old computers and thinks they're mysterious artifacts. She lives surrounded by the remnants of human civilization and can only wonder at their purpose. The irony is that she herself is a product of that lost civilization, a replicant created by technology she doesn't understand, living in a world shaped by decisions made thousands of years before she existed. The protagonist's home village represents a third approach to survival: normalcy. The village is unremarkable by design, a simple farming community with no elaborate rules like facade and no mystical mythology like the Aerie. People work the fields, raise animals, trade with neighboring settlements, and live simple lives. It's deliberately ordinary, intentionally mundane. But this normalcy is an illusion, carefully maintained by Devola and Popola. The twin administrators work behind the scenes to keep the village stable, to prevent panic, to maintain the fiction that life is normal and everything will be fine. They organize community events, settle disputes, manage resources, and provide information about the outside world. They're the invisible infrastructure that makes the village's comfortable normalcy possible. The villagers don't know that Devola and Popola never age. They don't notice that the twins have been managing the village for longer than any living person can remember. They don't question why these two women seem to know things they shouldn't, or how they always seem to have the answers to administrative questions. The villagers simply accept that Devola and Popola are there, helpful and kind, part of the village's permanent fixtures like the library and the fountain. This is by design. Project Gestalt's creators knew that replicants needed to maintain stable communities for the plan to work. They needed replicants to preserve knowledge, maintain infrastructure, and keep civilization alive while the Gestalt souls slept. So they created the Devola and Popola units, androids designed to guide and manage replicant communities without the replicants knowing they're being managed. There are multiple Devola and Popola units stationed at villages and settlements around the world. All identical, all following the same basic programming. They're supposed to facilitate Project Gestalt's completion, to help Gestalts reunite with their replicants when the time comes. But they've also developed genuine affection for the replicants they've spent thousands of years living among. The village also showcases various side characters who add depth to the world. There's the grumpy but kind-hearted blacksmith who upgrades the protagonist's weapons. There's the item shop owner who gossips about village affairs. There's the mailman who delivers letters and sometimes shares news from other settlements. There's the fishing enthusiast who challenges the protagonist to fishing contests. These NPCs feel real because they have their own lives and concerns beyond the main plot. Side quests in the village often reveal small tragedies that mirror the game's larger themes. There's the man whose wife died of the Black Scrawl, now raising his daughter alone. There's the couple struggling to conceive a child replicants can reproduce, but it's apparently more difficult for them than it was for original humans. There's the old woman whose memories are fading, leaving her confused and frightened. Every quest is a small story of struggle and loss. Seafront, which we mentioned earlier, represents prosperity at the cost of inequality. It's the largest and wealthiest settlement the protagonist visits, with a thriving fishing industry, active trade routes, and a proper government structure. But this prosperity isn't evenly distributed. There's a clear divide between wealthy merchants and poor laborers, between those who own boats and those who work on them. The lighthouse keeper in Seafront is a particularly tragic figure. She's an old woman who has tended the lighthouse for decades, keeping the flame burning to guide ships safely to port. She tells stories about the sea, about the old world, about times before the shades. She's a living repository of history and mythology, though she doesn't always distinguish clearly between the two. In one side quest chain, the lighthouse keeper tasks the protagonist with finding items for her seemingly random objects that trigger memories. As you complete these quests, she tells you stories about her life, about people she knew, about the world she's seen change. The final quest reveals she's dying of the black scrawl, and the objects were mementos of her life, things she wanted to see one last time before passing. When she dies, the lighthouse goes dark. The protagonist can light it again, but it's not the same. The lighthouse keeper's death is a small thing in a world full of death, but it represents the constant loss of knowledge and history. Every person who dies takes their memories with them, their stories, their understanding of the world. In a world without proper record keeping, where most people can't read or write, oral history is crucial, and it's dying, one person at a time. Seafront also introduces the concept of different social structures among replicant communities. Unlike the village's informal leadership or Facad's monarchy, Seafront has a mayor and a council, a more democratic or at least oligarchic system. This shows that replicants aren't just blindly following pre-programmed patterns, they're creating new social structures, adapting to their circumstances, developing unique cultures. The junk heap, while not a settlement per se, represents yet another aspect of the world, the scavenger economy. Jacobe and his team make their living salvaging old world technology, repairing what they can, selling what they can't. They don't understand how most of the technology works. They can't read the old languages or comprehend the principles behind the machines. But they've learned through trial and error which pieces are valuable, which parts can be repaired, which items are dangerous. The junk heap is built into what was once a massive industrial complex or military facility. The scavengers have carved out living spaces in the upper levels, while the lower levels remain dangerous and unexplored, filled with malfunctioning robots and unstable structures. It's a precarious existence, but it provides valuable goods to settlements that can't produce advanced materials themselves. Jacobe's story is interesting because he represents entrepreneurial spirit in a post-apocalyptic world. He's not content with simple farming or fishing. He wants to build something, to create a business, to become wealthy through salvage. He's ambitious in a world where most people are just trying to survive. His ambition is admirable, but it also puts him and his team in constant danger as they explore deeper into the facility seeking more valuable salvage. One of the junk heap quests involves a malfunctioning robot that's attacking Jacobe's team. The protagonist defeats the robot and Jacob salvages its parts for profit. It seems like a straightforward quest until you realize, in subsequent playthroughs, that the robot was actually trying to fulfill its programming. It was protecting the facility, defending against intruders, following orders given thousands of years ago by people long dead. The robot wasn't malfunctioning. It was working exactly as designed. Jacob and his team were the intruders, and the protagonist helped them by destroying a machine that was just doing its job. This is another example of NieR's moral complexity. Jacob isn't a villain for salvaging old technology. His community needs the materials, and the old world is gone. The robot isn't a villain for defending the facility. It was following its programming. The protagonist isn't a villain for destroying the robot. He was helping someone who asked for help. Everyone is behaving reasonably from their perspective. And yet the outcome is still tragic, still destructive, still a loss. The world of NieR Replicant is rich with these communities and cultures, each representing different survival strategies, different philosophical approaches to living in a broken world. Facade chooses order and tradition. The Eyrie chooses mythology and spirituality. The village chooses comfortable normalcy. Seafront chooses commerce and prosperity. The junk heap represents pragmatic salvage and adaptation. None of these approaches is wrong. None is entirely right. They're all coping mechanisms, ways that groups of people have found to create meaning and safety in a world that offers neither. And they're all doomed, because the fundamental problem, the conflict between gestalts and replicants, can't be solved by social structures or cultural traditions. It's built into the nature of their existence. As the protagonist travels between these communities, he's witnessing the full diversity of replicant civilization. These aren't mindless copies going through the motions. They're genuine societies with rich cultures, complex social dynamics, and meaningful traditions. They've built something worth preserving over the 3,000 years since their creation. They've become human in every way that matters, which makes what's coming even more tragic. Because for Project Gestalt to succeed, for the original humans to reclaim their bodies, all of this has to be destroyed. Every culture, every tradition, every person and every settlement has to die. The Gestalt's right to their original bodies requires the extinction of the replicant's consciousness. There's no compromise possible, no way for both to exist. The world the protagonist is trying to save by curing Yona, by collecting sealed verses, by defeating the Shadow Lord, is built on a foundation that's been crumbling for 3,000 years. And his quest, his heroic journey to save his sister, is actually the final blow that will bring the whole structure crashing down. Chapter 7. The Shadow Lord's Castle and the Truth Revealed. The path to the Shadow Lord's castle is paved with revelations, each one more devastating than the last. As the protagonist gets closer to collecting all the sealed verses, as he grows stronger and defeats more powerful shades, the fabric of the world's reality begins to tear. The comfortable lies start to unravel. And Devola and Popola, who have been guiding and supporting the protagonist since the beginning, are forced to reveal their true nature. The final act begins when Yona's condition suddenly worsens. The black scrawl spreads rapidly across her body, reaching critical levels. The protagonist, desperate and panicking, rushes her to Popola for help. Popola examines Yona and delivers devastating news. Yona is dying. The black scrawl has reached its terminal stage, and she has perhaps days left to live. All the protagonist's efforts, all the sealed verses he collected, all the enemies he defeated, none of it mattered. He's going to lose his sister anyway. But Popola offers one last hope. She tells the protagonist that there might be a way to save Yona, but it requires collecting the final sealed verses and confronting the Shadow Lord himself. She explains that the Shadow Lord has been behind the shade attacks, that he's been preventing the cure from working, that defeating him is the only way to save Yona and end the Black Scrawl forever. This is partially true and entirely a lie. Yes, defeating the Shadow Lord would end things, but not in the way the protagonist imagines. Popola is manipulating him, sending him to destroy the last hope of Gestalt's survival. She knows this, she hates it, but she has no choice. With renewed determination and desperation, the protagonist sets out to collect the final sealed verses. The dungeons become more difficult, the shades more numerous and powerful. It's clear that something is coordinating them, organizing them into a proper defense. That something is the Shadow Lord, trying desperately to stop the protagonist from completing Grimoire Weiss and using it to permanently end Project Gestalt. During these final quests, strange things begin to happen. Grimoire Weiss starts experiencing intense headaches and memory flashes. He sees images of a black book, of a cold world covered in snow, of a young girl sealing something away. He remembers a purpose, a mission, something about the project and reunification. He's confused and frightened by these memories, not understanding what they mean. Kane's possession by Tyron reaches a crisis point. The shade inside her becomes more aggressive, fighting harder for control. There are moments where Tyron takes over completely, where Kane's body moves without her consent, where she nearly attacks her companions. Emil has to use his petrification power to stop her, temporarily freezing her until she can regain control. These episodes are traumatic for everyone, but especially for Kane, who fears she's losing the internal battle and will soon become a monster permanently. Emil, meanwhile, discovers new powers within himself. His magical abilities expand and intensify, becoming more destructive and harder to control. He starts to remember fragments of his creation, of the experiments that made him what he is, of the purpose he was designed to serve. He realizes he's not just a victim of his sister's experiments, he's a weapon, specifically designed to destroy magical entities. He's a weapon pointed at shades, at grimoires, at the very supernatural elements that define this world. The tension within the party grows as they approach the endgame. Everyone senses that something is wrong, that the quest they've been on isn't as straightforward as it seemed. But they're too committed to stop now. Yona is dying. The Shadow Lord must be defeated. They've come too far to turn back. The breaking point comes when the protagonist returns to the village to prepare for the final assault on the Shadow Lord's castle. He finds the village under attack, not by random shades, but by an organized assault force. Powerful shades are systematically attacking the defenses, clearly coordinating their efforts. The protagonist and his companions fight alongside the villagers to repel the attack, but the shades keep coming in waves. In the chaos, the protagonist sees something that doesn't make sense. The shades are avoiding civilian casualties. They're attacking guards and fighters, but when they encounter non-combatants, they hesitate, bypass them, even protect them from crossfire. This isn't how mindless monsters behave. This is how soldiers behave. Soldiers who don't want to harm innocent people. The battle culminates in a confrontation with Devola and Popola. The twins appear, but instead of helping defend the village, they stand between the protagonist and the retreating shades. They reveal themselves as androids, as Project Gestalt administrators, as the beings who have been manipulating events from the beginning. Popola tries to explain. She tells the protagonist about Project Gestalt, about the separation of souls and bodies, about how replicants were supposed to be temporary vessels. She explains that the Shadow Lord is trying to save humanity, the original humanity, the Gestalts. She reveals that the protagonist is a replicant, a copy, and that killing the Shadow Lord will doom the original human race to extinction. The protagonist doesn't believe her, or can't believe her, or won't believe her, because accepting what Popola is saying means accepting that he's not real, that Yona isn't real, that everything he knows and loves is just a copy of something that came before. It means accepting that his quest to save his sister is actually dooming thousands of original humans. It means accepting that he's the villain. Devola and Popola, following their programming and their sense of duty, try to stop the protagonist from reaching the Shadow Lord's castle. They fight him, using abilities far beyond what any human or replicant should possess. They're androids, after all, machines designed to be stronger, faster, more durable than the beings they administer. The battle is brutal and desperate, with Devola and Popola fighting not out of hatred, but out of obligation. During the fight, Devola and Popola reveal their own internal conflict. They've spent thousands of years living among replicants, watching them grow and develop and become genuinely human. They've cared for villages, celebrated weddings, mourned deaths. They've come to love the replicants as much as they were programmed to protect the Gestalts. But their core programming compels them to facilitate Project Gestalt's completion, even though they know it means genocide. "We have no choice," Popola says, tears streaming down her face as she attacks. This is what we were made to do. We're sorry, Devola adds, her voice breaking. We're so sorry. They're apologizing even as they try to kill the protagonist. They're weeping even as they follow their programming. They're torn between duty and empathy, between what they were designed to do and what they've learned to feel. It's one of the most emotionally complex boss fights in gaming. You're fighting enemies who don't hate you, who are begging you to stop, who are suffering as much as you are. The protagonist defeats them. He has Tiona is dying, and the Shadow Lord is his only hope for a cure. Devola and Popola fall, their android bodies too damaged to continue fighting. They lie in the wreckage of their attempt to fulfill their purpose, having failed both the gestalts they were programmed to protect and the replicants they learned to love. In their final moments, Popola gives the protagonist one last piece of information, the entrance to the Shadow Lord's castle, and a warning about what he'll find there. She tells him that the Shadow Lord is trying to save his sister, just like the protagonist. She tells him that everyone loses no matter what happens. She tells him she's sorry. Then she shuts down, her systems failing, her centuries of existence ending in a village she helped build, killed by people she tried to protect. Devola, still barely functional, holds her sister's body and sings one last song in the ancient language, a song about loss, about duty, about the cruelty of fate. Then she too falls silent. The protagonist, his companions, and the surviving villagers are left in the aftermath. The village is damaged but still standing. Devola and Popola are dead, and the path to the Shadow Lord's castle is open. The journey to the castle is somber. The companions process what they've learned, trying to understand the implications. Weiss is having a full existential crisis, his recovered memories warring with his sense of self. Kane is quiet, contemplating the revelation that she's been fighting original humans, that every shade she gleefully destroyed was a person. Emile is trying to be supportive, trying to hold the group together, but even his optimism is strained. The Shadow Lord's castle is a massive fortress, clearly built from old-world technology and materials. It's a mixture of ancient architecture and incomprehensible machinery, a place that doesn't quite belong to the medieval world the protagonist knows. The castle is filled with the most powerful shades yet encountered, the last remnants of stable gestalts, the ones who haven't fully relapsed, who still remember enough of themselves to follow the Shadow Lord's leadership. As the protagonist fights through the castle, he begins to notice something. The shades here don't attack with mindless aggression. They fight with tactics, with coordination, with clear strategic goals. They're trying to delay rather than kill, to slow the protagonist's advance rather than stop it permanently. It's as if they know they can't win and are simply buying time for something. Deep in the castle, the protagonist encounters Grimoire Noir, the black book that appeared in the prologue, the book that Yona sealed away so long ago. Noir has been partially unsealed by the Shadow Lord's efforts, and its consciousness is partially restored. It recognizes Grimoire Weiss as its counterpart and sibling, the white book to its black. Noir tells Weiss the full truth. They were created together, two halves of a whole, designed to facilitate Project Gestalt. Weiss was meant to help replicants maintain society and then facilitate reunification when the time came. Noir was meant to protect and stabilize Gestalt souls. Together, they could have ensured humanity's survival. But Noir was sealed by Yona in 2049, trapping its power and preventing the system from working properly. Weiss is devastated by this revelation. His entire purpose, his reason for existence, was to help destroy the beings he's come to care about. He was supposed to facilitate the replicants' extinction, to help the Gestalts reclaim their bodies. Everything he is, everything he was designed to do, contradicts everything he's become through his journey with the protagonist. Noir tries to convince Weiss to remember his purpose, to help complete Project Gestalt. but Weiss refuses. He's developed loyalty to the protagonist, affection for Cain and Emil, attachment to the replicant world. He chooses his newfound identity over his designed purpose. He rejects NieR's call to fulfill his original function. This rejection has consequences. Grimoire NieR, acting on its own programming and desperate to save what's left of the Gestalt population, does something drastic. It possesses Yona. Remember, Gestalt Yona's soul has been bound with Grimoire NieR since 2049. Her consciousness has been sleeping, sealed away for over 3,000 years. But she's still there, still connected to NieR. When NieR awakens fully, so does she. And when NieR realizes that the protagonist is about to destroy the last chance for Gestalt's survival, it gives Gestalt Yona control of Replicant Yona's body. The protagonist finds his sister in the deepest chamber of the castle, but she's different. She speaks with NieR's voice, with Gestalt Yona's memories. She remembers the summer of 2049, the cold world, the desperate fight for survival. She remembers her brother, not the replicant protagonist, but the original Gestalt, the Shadow Lord. She recognizes the protagonist as a copy, a fake, an obstacle to reuniting with her real brother. This scene is heartbreaking because both Yonas are real. Gestalt Yona has every right to want her body back. It was her body first, stolen by the artificial consciousness that developed in the replicant copy. Replicant Yona, though currently overwritten, is also real. She's a genuine consciousness that developed over years of life and experience. The protagonist loves Replicant Yona, but Gestalt Yona also deserves to exist. There's no good solution, no happy compromise. Someone has to die for someone else to live. The Shadow Lord appears, and the truth crashes down with final, crushing weight. The Shadow Lord is the original protagonist, the man from the prologue, the original Gestalt. He's the real Big Brother, the original person whose body the replicant protagonist was copied from. He's been fighting for over 3,000 years to save his sister, and he's finally on the verge of success. He looks at the replicant protagonist with a mixture of pity and contempt. This copy wearing his face, this magical construct has destroyed everything he worked for. The replicant has killed hundreds of Gestalts, prevented countless reunifications, and sided with Grimoire Weiss in rejecting their designed purpose. The Shadow Lord has every reason to hate the replicant, but he doesn't hate him. He understands him, because the Shadow Lord remembers being in the replicant's position, desperate to save Yona, willing to do anything, unable to accept the possibility of losing her. The Shadow Lord sees himself in the replicant, sees the same determination and love and refusal to give up. It's like fighting a mirror, a reflection of who he used to be. The final boss battle isn't really about good versus evil. It's about two brothers who both love their sister. Both versions of the same person fighting over two versions of the same girl. It's about which Yona deserves to live, which brother has the stronger claim, which reality is more valid, the original that came first, or the copy that developed consciousness. The battle is epic in scope, with the Shadow Lord using powers beyond anything the protagonist has faced before. He wields dark magic that mirrors Weiss's abilities, controlling shade forces and supernatural energy. He's had thousands of years to master these powers, and he uses them with devastating efficiency. But the protagonist has something the Shadow Lord doesn't: companions. Cain and Emil fight alongside the protagonist, supporting him, covering his weaknesses. Weiss channels his full power into helping defeat his dark counterpart. The battle becomes 4 against 1 replicant protagonists, Cain, Emil, and Grimoire Weiss versus the Shadow Lord. Even then, it's close. The Shadow Lord is immensely powerful, driven by desperation and love. He's fighting for his sister, for the last remnants of humanity, for the culmination of 3,000 years of struggle. He can't lose. He won't lose. But he does lose. The protagonist and his companions, working together, manage to wear down the Shadow Lord's defenses. They damage him, weaken him, push him to his limits. and in a final desperate assault, they deliver the killing blow. The Shadow Lord falls. The original Gestalt, the hero of the prologue, the man who sacrificed everything to save his sister, dies without ever achieving his goal. He lies on the ground, his form breaking apart, his consciousness fading after over 3,000 years of existence. In his final moments, he reaches toward Yona Gestalt Yona, still possessing the replicant body. He whispers an apology. He says he's sorry he couldn't save her, sorry he failed, sorry that after all this time and effort, he has to leave her alone again. Then he disappears, his Gestalt soul dissipating into nothing. The original Gestalt is dead. The Shadow Lord is no more. It's the protagonist has won. Except he hasn't, because with the Shadow Lord dead, Project Gestalt is finished. There's no one left to stabilize the remaining Gestalts. They'll all relapse now, become mindless shades, and eventually fade away. The original human race, every soul that entered Project Gestalt hoping to outlast the apocalypse and reclaim their bodies, is doomed to extinction. The protagonist has just caused the end of humanity. The original, actual, biological human race is finished. And Yona? Gestalt Yona's consciousness fades with the Shadow Lord's death. She's been bound to Grimoire Noir for so long that without the Shadow Lord's stabilizing presence, she can't maintain coherence. She disappears, her soul finally at rest after 3,000 years of imprisonment. The replicant Yona's consciousness returns, but she's still dying of the Black Scrawl. Defeating the Shadow Lord didn't cure her, it never could have. The Black Scrawl isn't a disease. It's a built-in expiration mechanism. Replicant Yona was always going to die. The protagonist has achieved nothing. He destroyed the original human race, he killed his original self, and he still couldn't save his sister. Everything he did, every shade he killed, every boss he defeated, every sealed verse he collected, it was all for nothing. Worse than nothing. He's a mass murderer on a species-wide scale, and he did it all for love. This is the culmination of NieR Replicant's tragedy. The protagonist was never the hero. He was always the villain, the obstacle preventing humanity's last hope for survival. But he couldn't have known that. He was just trying to save his sister, doing what anyone would do in his position. He had no way of knowing he was a copy, that the monsters he fought were people, that his quest would doom an entire race. The game doesn't let you feel good about this victory. The music is somber, not triumphant. The characters are shell-shocked, not celebrating. Cain and Emil look at what they've done, the Gestalts they've killed, the race they've exterminated, and realize they're monsters. Weiss, who now remembers everything, is consumed with guilt and horror at what his existence facilitated. But there's no time to process this trauma because Yona is still dying. The protagonist carries his unconscious sister out of the castle, desperate to find help, unwilling to accept that there's nothing left to try. He's in denial, refusing to acknowledge that the quest failed, that the sacrifice was pointless, that he's going to lose her anyway. Chapter 8. The Endings. A through E. NieR Replicant doesn't have one ending. It has 5, each unlocked by playing through the game multiple times and each revealing more truth, more tragedy, more devastating implications. This structure is brilliant because it mirrors the game's themes, the idea that perspective matters, that truth is layered, that understanding requires seeing events from multiple angles. Ending A, the first playthrough. Ending A is what most players experience on their first journey through the game. After defeating the Shadow Lord, the protagonist carries dying Yona back to the village. Popola and Devola are dead, their guidance gone. The village is damaged but recovering, and Yona, miraculously, begins to improve. This is the happy ending, though calling it happy is a stretch. Yona survives somehow, the game doesn't explain exactly how. The Black Scrawl recedes, her condition stabilizes. The protagonist and Yona can continue living in the village together as brother and sister. They've suffered and sacrificed, but they're together. That's what matters, right? Except players who paid attention know better. They know that the Gestalts are extinct, that humanity is finished, that the protagonist killed thousands of people for this. They know that Yona shouldn't have survived, that her recovery doesn't make biological or magical sense. They know something is wrong with this ending, that it's too neat, too convenient. The ending deliberately feels hollow. The victory music is melancholic. The final scenes show life returning to normal, but there's an emptiness to it. Cain has left without saying goodbye, unable to face the protagonist after what they did. Emil is trying to be cheerful, but clearly traumatized. Weiss is silent, his personality subdued by guilt and recovered memories. Ending A is the lie the protagonist tells himself. It's the denial that allows him to keep living after committing genocide. It's the false happy ending that most video games would present as the real conclusion. And NieR lets you have it, lets you believe you saved your sister, defeated the evil villain, and won the day. It's only if you choose to play again, to dig deeper, that the game reveals how false this happiness really is. Ending B, the Shade's perspective. Starting a new game after completing Ending A unlocks additional content. The second playthrough begins at the halfway point of the story rather than the beginning's save-in time. But more importantly, it adds new scenes, additional dialogue, expanded cutscenes, and most devastatingly, the ability to understand what the Shades are saying. Remember all those Shades you fought? The ones that made incomprehensible noises? In playthrough 2, you can understand them. They're speaking human languages, Japanese, English, other languages from the old world. They're not making monster sounds. They're talking, begging, screaming, crying. Every battle becomes a horror show. The Shades are calling out for their families, asking why you're attacking them, pleading for mercy. The small Shades that scurry away are children crying for their mothers. The aggressive Shades that attack in groups are parents defending their kids. The boss Shades are individuals with names, histories, and people who love them. One of the most haunting moments comes during the Wolf Shade fight in the manor. In playthrough 1, you just hear growling. In playthrough 2, you hear a voice saying, "I'm just protecting this place like I was told. Why are you attacking me? I'm just doing my job. Please, I don't want to fight. I'm a good dog. I'm a good boy." The Shade is a dog. A loyal, loving dog that became a Gestalt alongside its human owner, that retained its canine loyalty even after relapsing, that spent thousands of years guarding a location because that's what its master would have wanted. And the protagonist kills it for a sealed verse and some experience points. The Seafront Shade, the massive one disrupting fishing, is even worse. You hear a woman's voice, "Where's my body? I know it's here. I can feel it. I just want to go home. Why won't anyone help me? I'm so tired. I've been looking for so long. Please, I just want to rest." She's not attacking ships out of malice. She's confused, exhausted, desperate. She's been drifting as a formless soul for millennia, and she's finally close to her body, so close to being whole again. And the protagonist kills her because she's inconvenient for the fishing industry. The couple in the desert, the two Shades tending the flower garden, are perhaps the most heartbreaking. You hear their voices as you attack them. "Did we plant the seeds yet? I think so. Should we water them? The flowers will grow soon, won't they? They have to. We promised we'd see them bloom together. I don't remember. What were we doing? I don't know. But you're here. That's all I need. I love you. I love you too." And then they die, still reaching for each other, still trying to remember why they're there, still believing that somehow their flowers will bloom. The protagonist loots their bodies and moves on to the next objective. Playthrough 2 also expands on the Shadow Lord's storyline. You see scenes from his perspective, showing his desperation and grief. You see him trying to coordinate the remaining Gestalts, trying to prevent more relapses, trying desperately to find a way to save Yona and preserve what's left of humanity. He's not an evil overlord. He's a broken man who has been fighting alone for over 3,000 years, watching everything he worked for crumble, unable to save the one person he loves most. There's a scene where the Shadow Lord is alone in his castle, holding a music box that plays Yona's favorite song from when she was a child in 2049. He's crying not the body, which is just a magical construct, but the soul, expressing grief in a way that transcends physical form. He's remembering the sister he had, the little girl who sealed Grimoire Noir to save him, the child who has been asleep for thousands of years while he fought to save her. "I'm so tired, Yana," he says. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. The others are relapsing. The project is failing. And that copy of me, he's killing everyone. He's destroying everything we worked for. I know he doesn't understand. I know he thinks he's the hero. But I can't let him take you away from me. Not after all this time. Please wake up. Please come back to me. I need you." This scene recontextualizes everything. The Shadow Lord isn't fighting to conquer the world or destroy the replicants out of cruelty. He's fighting because he's been alone for 3,000 years, and his sister is the only family he has left. He's fighting because giving up would mean those 3,000 years of waiting were for nothing. He's fighting because he loves her, just like the protagonist loves his Yona. Ending B concludes the same way as ending A. The Shadow Lord dies. Yona survives, the protagonist wins. But now you know the full cost. You've heard the Shade's voices, seen the Shadow Lord's grief, understood that you've been the villain all along. The ending doesn't feel like a victory anymore. It feels like a war crime, like genocide, like a tragedy where everyone loses, and the person who loses most is the one who thinks he won. The game asks you a question after ending B. Do you want to continue? Do you want to keep playing, knowing what you now know? Do you want to see where this story goes? Or do you want to stop here, preserving at least the memory of that hollow victory from ending A? Most players continue, because despite perhaps because of the horror, they're invested. They need to know if there's any way this can be fixed, any path to redemption, any ending that isn't completely soul-crushing. There isn't, but you don't know that yet. Ending C, Kain's sacrifice. The third playthrough continues from ending B, but adds one final quest. After the Shadow Lord's defeat, after Yona's miraculous recovery, there's a problem. Kain's possession by Tyron has reached a critical point. With the Shadow Lord dead and Project Gestalt collapsing, the magical rules governing the world are breaking down. Terran, the shade inside Kain, is becoming more powerful, taking control more often, threatening to completely overwrite Kain's personality. Kain can feel herself losing. She's fought Tiaran for years, maintained control through sheer willpower, but she's exhausted. Every day is a battle, and she's losing ground. She knows that soon, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, Tiaran will win. She ceased to exist, and her body will become a vessel for a malevolent shade that will kill everyone she loves. So Kain does the only thing she can. She asks the protagonist to kill her. The scene is set in a field of lunar flowers, Kain's favorite place. She explains the situation calmly, matter-of-factly. She's not scared, or at least she's not showing it. She's made peace with her decision. She's going to die on her own terms, by the hand of someone she trusts, before Tyron can use her to hurt others. "I don't want to become a monster," she says. "I don't want you to remember me that way. So please, while I'm still me, end this." The protagonist refuses. He's already lost so much, made so many sacrifices. He can't lose Kain too. There has to be another way. Emil steps forward with a solution. He can use his petrification magic to seal Kain in stone, freezing her in time. It won't kill her, but it will stop Terran from taking control. She'll be preserved, safe, until they can find a way to remove Terran permanently. But Kain refuses this option. She doesn't want to be a statue, frozen and helpless. She doesn't want to be a burden, an object her friends have to protect and carry. She wants to end this on her terms, to die as herself, rather than live as a prisoner in her own petrified body. The game gives you a choice: kill Cain or find another way. If you choose to kill Cain, the protagonist raises his weapon with trembling hands. Cain smiles, thanks him for everything, for accepting her, for being her friend when no one else would. She asks him to take care of Emil and Yona. She says she's not scared. Then she closes her eyes and waits. The screen fades to black. You hear the sound of a sword striking. When the screen returns, Cain is lying in the lunar flowers, her body still and peaceful. The protagonist, Emil, Yona, and Weiss stand around her in silence. They've lost their friend, their companion, the woman who fought beside them through everything. They bury her in the field of lunar flowers. The protagonist plants more flowers around her grave, creating a garden of white blooms. It's beautiful and heartbreaking, a peaceful resting place for someone who never knew peace in life. This is ending C. Loss, even victory comes at a cost. Even surviving the main quest doesn't mean everyone gets a happy ending. Cain sacrificed herself to prevent a greater tragedy, and her friends have to live with that sacrifice, carrying the weight of her death alongside all the other deaths they caused. The ending is quiet and somber. Life goes on in the village. Yana is healthy. Emil tries to stay cheerful. Weiss is there, a constant presence. But there's a hole in the group, an absence that can't be filled. Every time they gather, there's an empty space where Cain should be, cursing and joking and being alive. It's a tragedy, but it feels earned. It feels like the natural consequence of everything that came before. In a story this dark, this willing to hurt its characters, losing Cain to her inner demon is thematically appropriate. It's sad, but it makes sense. Except there's another option. Ending D, erasure. If you choose not to kill Cain, the game presents an alternative. The protagonist can sacrifice himself instead. Not his life, something worse. His existence. Weiss explains that there might be a way to save Cain without killing her. If someone were to sacrifice their entire existence, not just dying, but being erased from reality, removed from everyone's memories, wiped from the world as if they never existed, that sacrifice could generate enough magical power to expel Tehran from Cain permanently. It's a terrible price. Not only would the protagonist die, but everyone would forget him. Yona wouldn't remember her brother. Emil wouldn't remember his friend. Cain wouldn't remember the person who saved her. All the bonds formed, all the adventures shared, all the moments of connection, gone, erased, as if they never happened. The protagonist doesn't hesitate. He's already killed thousands of people, already doomed humanity, already stained his soul beyond redemption. If he can save Cain's life, give her a chance to be free of Tehran, and live on her own terms, it's worth any price. Even this one. The game asks you directly, are you sure you want to do this? This choice cannot be undone. You will lose everything. If you agree, if you choose to sacrifice the protagonist's existence to save Cain, something unprecedented happens. The game deletes your save file. Not just marks it as complete, deletes it, erases it from existence. All your progress, all your items, all your playtime, gone. The protagonist's erasure from the world's memory is mirrored by his erasure from your console's memory. You cannot reload. You cannot go back. You cannot undo this choice. It's one of the most powerful moments in gaming. The game asks you to sacrifice something real, your own time and effort. The save file you've built up over multiple playthroughs to save a fictional character. It makes the sacrifice tangible, personal. You're not just watching the protagonist give something up. You're giving something up too. The final scene shows Cain screaming as Tehran is ripped from her soul. She's free finally, after years of possession. She collapses in the lunar flowers, no longer fighting an internal battle, no longer in danger of losing herself. She's saved. But as she opens her eyes and looks around, she's confused. Who saved me? She asks. She can see Emil and Yona, can remember them clearly. But there's something missing, someone missing. She knows someone else should be there. She can feel the absence like a hole in her memory, like a word on the tip of her tongue that she can't quite remember. Emil and Yana feel it too. They know something is wrong, that they've forgotten something important, but they can't remember what. They stand together in the field of lunar flowers, feeling an inexplicable grief for someone they can't recall. The protagonist is gone, erased. He saved his sister, saved his friends, and paid the ultimate price. He doesn't exist anymore, not in memory, not in reality, not anywhere. He's truly, completely gone. Ending D is called Erasure, and it's one of the most emotionally devastating endings in gaming history. It's not sad because everyone dies. Endings like that are common. It's sad because the protagonist's sacrifice means no one can mourn him. No one can remember his heroism, his sacrifice, his love. He's just gone, forgotten, as if he never mattered at all. For years, Ending D was considered the true ending of NieR Replicant, the final word on the story. It was bleak, nihilistic, and perfectly in character for Yoko Taro. The hero saves everyone and is erased from existence as payment. No one gets a happy ending, but at least Kane gets to live. But the remake added one more ending, one final chapter to the story, and it changes everything. Ending E, the redemption. Ending E was created specifically for NieR Replicant VR.1.22474487139, bridging the gap between Replicant and Automata. It's unlocked after achieving Ending D and waiting a significant amount of time, or in typical Yoko Taro fashion, by manipulating your system clock or finding someone else's cleared save data. Ending E begins with Kane, years after the protagonist's erasure, living alone in his old house in the village. She's taken on the role of protector, defending the village from shades, carrying on the work the protagonist used to do. But she's haunted by the absence she can't define, the feeling that someone important is missing. She finds a letter, or more accurately, the letter finds her. It's written in a language she doesn't understand, but when she reads it, she somehow knows what it says. It's from the protagonist. Somehow, impossibly, he managed to leave a message behind, a piece of himself that survived the erasure. The letter doesn't explain how it's possible, it just is. The protagonist's love for his friends, his determination to protect them, was so strong that it left an impression on reality itself. Not enough to restore his existence, but enough to create a bridge, a possibility, a tiny thread of hope. Kane is given a choice. She can try to bring him back. It will require sacrifice, her own memories, her own existence. The very fabric of reality will have to be torn apart and rewoven. It's impossible. It's insane. It goes against every magical rule that governs the world. She decides to try anyway. What follows is one of the most surreal sequences in the game. Kane fights through a dreamlike space filled with fragments of memories, battling corrupted versions of enemies from throughout the game. The bosses return, twisted and wrong, representing obstacles to the protagonist's restoration. Text floods the screen, asking questions about the protagonist's life, his adventures, his bonds with others. The game asks you, the player, to help. It asks you to remember the protagonist, to input details about him, to prove that he mattered, that he existed, that he deserves to come back. You answer questions about his journey, his choices, his relationships. You're helping Kane reconstruct the protagonist's existence from fragments and memories. Other players help too. If you're connected online, save data from other players who achieved Ending D contributes to the effort. Thousands of players, all working together across time and space, all trying to undo one protagonist's erasure. It's a beautiful metaphor, the idea that stories matter, that memory matters, That collective remembrance can restore what seemed permanently lost. The battle is brutal. Kain fights through increasingly difficult waves of enemies, her health dropping, her magic depleting. She's dying, sacrificing herself bit by bit to fuel the resurrection. The game asks you multiple times if you want to stop, if the sacrifice is too great, if maybe it's better to accept the loss and move on. But Kain doesn't stop. She can't stop, because she remembers now, not clearly, but enough. She remembers someone who accepted her when no one else would, who fought beside her, who saw her as a person rather than a monster. She remembers that she loved him, though she never got to say it. She remembers that he deserves to exist, that erasing him was wrong, that reality itself is flawed if it allows someone like him to be forgotten. The final phase of the battle pushes Kain to her absolute limit. She's barely conscious, her body breaking down, her existence fracturing. The game asks one final time, "Are you sure? This will cost everything." Kain will have to sacrifice her physical form, her memories, maybe even her soul. She agrees, because some people are worth any sacrifice. Because love, real, genuine love, doesn't calculate costs and benefits. Because bringing him back is the right thing to do, even if it costs her everything. Reality breaks. The world shatters and reforms. Time flows backward and forward simultaneously. And in a field of lunar flowers, a young man opens his eyes. The protagonist is back, fully restored, memories intact, existence reaffirmed. He's confused, disoriented, not understanding what happened or how. He remembers sacrificing himself for Kain. He remembers being erased. But now he's here, solid and real and alive. And Kain is there too, somehow, against all odds. Against every magical law, she managed to bring him back without completely destroying herself. She's different, damaged, changed by what she did, but she's there, and she's smiling. They stand together in the lunar flowers, two people who should be dead or erased or lost, somehow given another chance. Emil appears, drawn by the magical disturbance. Yona comes running from the village. Grimoire Weiss materializes, sputtering with confusion. The party is reunited, impossibly, miraculously. Ending E doesn't erase the tragedy of the main story. The Gestalts are still extinct. Humanity is still doomed. The protagonist still caused genocide. None of that changes. But in this one small way, in this tiny corner of the world, something good happened. Someone came back. Someone was saved. The erasure was undone. It's not a happy ending, not really. The world is still broken. The future is still bleak. The sins of the past can't be forgiven. But it's hopeful. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, the cycle of tragedy can be broken. That love and determination and collective effort can accomplish the impossible. That even in Yoko Taro's cruel universe, there's room for one small miracle. Ending E sets up NieR Automata by showing that consciousness, memory, and existence are fluid concepts. If an erased person can be brought back, if memories can be restored through collective will, if reality itself can be hacked and rewritten, well, that opens up possibilities for the far future when androids inherit the Earth. The 5 endings work together as a complete narrative arc. Ending A gives you the lie, the false victory. Ending B reveals the truth, showing you were always the villain. Ending C forces you to accept loss, to sacrifice someone you care about. Ending D makes you pay the ultimate price, erasing yourself to save another. And ending E offers redemption, a tiny spark of hope in a world of despair. Together, they form one of the most complex and emotionally devastating narrative structures in gaming. Each ending builds on the previous ones, revealing more truth, forcing harder choices, and ultimately asking fundamental questions about identity, sacrifice, and whether hope can exist in a fundamentally tragic world. Chapter 9: Weapon Stories and Hidden Lore. One of NieR Replicant's most brilliant storytelling techniques is its weapon stories. Every weapon the protagonist can equip, and there are dozens, has a unique backstory told through short text entries. These aren't just flavor text. They're fully realized short stories that expand the world's lore, reveal hidden tragedies, and provide context that the main narrative doesn't have time to explore. The weapon stories follow a pattern. Each weapon has multiple levels, and reaching each level unlocks another chapter of its story. The stories are always tragic, always revealing some aspect of the world's brokenness, and often providing heartbreaking context for seemingly minor elements of the game. Let's examine some of the most significant weapon stories and what they reveal about the world of NieR. Iron Pipe, the story of the end. The simplest weapon, a rusted iron pipe, has one of the most devastating stories. It tells the tale of a man during the White Chlorination Syndrome apocalypse, not during the main game, but during the original outbreak in the 2040s. The man is trying to protect his family as civilization collapses around them. He arms himself with a simple iron pipe because that's all he has. Each level of the story shows him losing more. First his neighbors turn into legion, then his friends, then his wife contracts the disease. He fights desperately to protect his daughter, to get her to safety, to find somewhere the disease can't reach. The final level reveals he failed. His daughter contracted White Chlorination Syndrome. He had to watch her turn into salt, crumbling to dust in his arms. The last entry is simply, "I'm so tired. Maybe I'll just rest here a while." This weapon story provides context for the prologue. It shows how common, how widespread the apocalypse was. The protagonist from 2049 wasn't special in his suffering. Millions of people went through similar horrors. The world was full of parents trying to save their children, full of desperate last stands with improvised weapons, full of people who fought until they couldn't fight anymore. Phoenix Spear, the loyal robot. The Phoenix Spear story is told from the perspective of a military robot designed to protect humans. The robot is assigned to a specific soldier, programmed to keep him safe at all costs. They fight together through countless battles during what appears to be the wars surrounding White Chlorination Syndrome. The soldier is kind to the robot, treating it like a companion rather than a tool. He gives it a name, talks to it during quiet moments, and thanks it for its protection. The robot, despite being a machine, develops something like affection for its soldier. It wants to protect him not just because of programming, but because he's important. Then the soldier dies, struck down by disease rather than enemy fire. The robot tries to save him, tries everything in its programming, but biological threats are beyond its capability. The soldier's final words are, "Thank you. You were a good friend." The robot continues functioning for thousands of years after its soldier's death. It wanders the ruins of the world, still following its last order, protect humans. But there are no humans left to protect, only replicants, who the robot's sensors can't recognize as the same species. The robot becomes hostile, attacking replicants because they don't register as human to its ancient sensors. Eventually, the robot is destroyed by a replicant adventurer who turns its parts into a weapon. The Phoenix Spear is forged from a loyal guardian that spent millennia trying to fulfill its duty to a species that no longer existed. When the protagonist uses this weapon, he's wielding the remains of a creature that was trying to protect him, but couldn't recognize him as worth protecting. Rebirth, the mother's love. Rebirth is a sword with one of the most heartbreaking stories in the game. It tells the tale of a mother and her child during the early days of Project Gestalt. The mother volunteers for the Gestalt process to save her young son, who has contracted White Chlorination Syndrome. They're both converted, souls separated from bodies, stored away to wait for reunification. The mother's Gestalt is stable, but her son's begins to relapse almost immediately. Children's Gestalts are more vulnerable, less able to maintain cohesion without bodies. The mother watches helplessly as her son's soul degrades. He forgets her name. He forgets his own name. He becomes more and more animalistic, more shade-like. She tries to reach him, to remind him of who he is, but he's too far gone. Eventually, he doesn't recognize her at all. He becomes a shade, violent and mindless. But the mother never gives up. She finds a way to partially materialize, to create a physical form from magical energy. She teaches herself to fight, to wield a blade. She hunts down her son's shade, not to destroy it but to protect it. She becomes a guardian shade, defending her relapsed child from other threats, keeping him alive even though he's essentially gone. For thousands of years, she protects him. Other shades try to consume his essence. Replicants attack him. The environment itself threatens his degraded existence. And the mother fights off every threat, never resting, never giving up, keeping her promise to always protect her child. The final level of the story reveals the mother's shade and her child's shade were both killed by a replicant adventurer farming materials. Neither put up much of a fight. The mother was too weak from thousands of years of constant vigilance, and the child was too far gone to understand the danger. They were struck down together, and their essences were used to forge a weapon. The rebirth sword is forged from a mother's eternal devotion and her son's innocent soul. When the protagonist uses it, he's wielding the materialized love of a mother who protected her child for millennia, who never stopped fighting even when all hope was gone. And he has no idea. Fool's Embrace, the wedding gift. Fool's Embrace is a massive two-handed sword with a story of love and loss. It belonged to a blacksmith who lived before the white chlorination syndrome, in the old world when humans still had technology and civilization. The blacksmith was ordinary, not particularly talented or remarkable, but he fell in love with a woman who was extraordinary, brilliant, beautiful, successful in ways he could never match. He felt unworthy of her, like a fool for even hoping she might love him back. To his surprise, she did love him. They married, and he wanted to give her a perfect wedding gift, something worthy of her. He decided to forge a sword, the greatest sword he'd ever made, pouring all his skill and love into its creation. He worked for months, perfecting every detail, determined to create something as remarkable as she was. He finished the sword the day white chlorination syndrome reached their city. His wife contracted the disease before he could give her the gift. She died in his arms, and he never got to show her what he'd made for her. The blacksmith survived, went through Project Gestalt, became a Gestalt soul waiting for reunification. But he relapsed. The grief was too much, the memories too painful. His Gestalt degraded, becoming a shade. He spent thousands of years as a mindless entity, wandering the ruins with the sword he'd forged, unable to remember why it was important, but unable to let it go. The protagonist finds this shade in a ruin, defeats it, and claims the sword. The weapon is incredibly powerful, forged with genuine skill and love. It cuts through enemies with ease. But the protagonist never knows it's a wedding gift that was never delivered. That the shade he killed was a man who lost everything and couldn't let go of the one thing he'd made for love. Faith, the brothers promise. Faith is a weapon whose story hits particularly close to the main narrative's themes. It tells the story of two brothers during the late stages of civilization's collapse. The younger brother was sick, not with white chlorination syndrome, but with a natural illness, cancer or something similar. The older brother promised he'd find a cure, that he'd save his younger brother no matter what it took. He searched desperately for medicine, for doctors, for any hope. Then Project Gestalt was announced. The older brother saw it as salvation, separate the younger brother's soul from his diseased body, wait for medical science to advance during the centuries of sleep, and reunite soul and body when a cure was developed. It was perfect. It would work. Both brothers volunteered for Project Gestalt. The separation process worked. But the younger brother's Gestalt was unstable from the start. His illness had weakened not just his body, but his soul's cohesion. Within years of separation, he began to relapse. The older brother watched helplessly as his younger brother's consciousness degraded, becoming less human and more animalistic with each passing year. He tried everything, staying close to his brother's Gestalt, sharing his own stability, even attempting experimental reunion procedures that all failed. Nothing worked. Eventually, the younger brother became a full shade, all personality and memory gone. The older brother, devastated but determined, found a way to forge a weapon from magical energy, a physical manifestation of his faith that somehow, someday, he could still save his brother. He named it Faith, because that's all he had left. For thousands of years, the older brother searched for a cure for relapse, a way to restore consciousness to degraded gestalts. He protected his brother's shade from other threats, keeping it alive even though the person he loved was already gone. His faith never wavered, even as centuries passed with no progress, no hope, no sign that success was possible. The younger brother's shade was eventually killed by a replicant hunter gathering materials. The older brother, watching his last hope die, finally relapsed himself. Both brothers became mindless shades, were both eventually killed, and the weapon Faith was claimed as loot by adventurers who never knew its story. This weapon story is a perfect mirror of the main narrative Two Brothers. Illness, desperate promises, Project Gestalt, and ultimate failure despite unwavering determination. The Faith weapon literally embodies the same journey the protagonist is on, serving as a warning he never receives about the futility of his quest. Iron Will, the soldier's last stand. Iron Will tells the story of a military commander during the final defense of a major city against white chlorination syndrome. The commander knew the city was doomed. The disease was everywhere. Legion attacks were constant, and evacuation was impossible. But he refused to abandon his post. He organized the remaining soldiers into a defensive force, not to win, but to buy time. Time for civilians to escape. Time for scientists to work on Project Gestalt. Time for humanity to have one more chance at survival. He knew he and his soldiers would die, but if their deaths meant even a few more people reaching safety, it was worth it. The defense lasted for weeks. Soldiers fell one by one to disease or combat or exhaustion. The commander held the line, inspiring his troops, refusing to retreat. When he was the last one standing, wounded and surrounded, he planted his sword in the ground and kept fighting with his bare hands. He died standing, defending a city full of corpses, buying time for survivors who might never know his name. His sword remained planted in the ground for thousands of years, a monument to pointless heroism, to sacrifice that achieved nothing, to the countless people who died believing their deaths mattered. A replicant eventually found the sword and pulled it free, melting it down for materials and reforging it into a new weapon. The commander's last stand was forgotten, his sacrifice meaningless, his heroism reduced to crafting materials for someone who never knew he existed. The pattern of weapon stories. Every weapon story follows the same pattern. Someone tried to protect something they loved. They failed, they suffered, and eventually they were reduced to materials for a weapon. The stories span the entire timeline, from before white chlorination syndrome through Project Gestalt's creation to the era of replicants and shades. The weapon stories reveal that tragedy is universal in NieR's world. It's not just the main characters who suffer, everyone suffers. Every person, every gestalt, every replicant has a story of loss and failure. The world is built on layers and layers of tragedy, each generation suffering in new ways while standing on the graves of the previous generation's suffering. When the protagonist equips these weapons, he's literally wielding the materialized grief and love and determination of people who came before. Every swing of the sword is empowered by someone's failed promise, someone's broken dream, someone's pointless sacrifice. The protagonist is strong because he stands on a foundation of accumulated tragedy. This is brilliant environmental storytelling. The weapons aren't just gameplay tools, they're narrative devices that expand the world's scope beyond what the main story can show. They prove that the protagonist's tragedy isn't unique. Every character in NieR's world is the protagonist of their own tragic story. The weapon stories also reinforce the game's central theme: love leads to suffering. Every story is about someone who loved something, a family member, a comrade, a partner, humanity itself, and that love drove them to fight, to sacrifice, to keep going long after hope was lost. And every story ends in failure. Love doesn't conquer all in NieR's world. Love just makes the inevitable loss hurt more. But the stories also show that love matters anyway. The mother who protected her relapsed son for thousands of years achieved nothing tangible. Her son never recovered. She eventually died, and both were forgotten, but she kept her promise. She loved her child until the very end. That matters, even if no one remembers it. The blacksmith who forged a wedding gift for his dying wife wasted months of work on a sword she never saw. But he made something beautiful for love. That matters, even though the gift was never delivered. The brothers, the soldiers, the robots, the parents, all of them failed. All of them suffered. All of them were forgotten. But they tried. They fought for what they loved. They refused to give up, even when giving up was rational. And in a world as broken as NieR's, that refusal to surrender to despair is itself a form of heroism. Chapter 10. Connections to NieR, Automata and the Bigger Picture. NieR Replicant takes place around the year 3361 relative to 2049's starting point. NieR, Automata takes place approximately 8,000 years later, in the year 11,945. That's a massive time gap, and understanding what happens in those millennia is crucial to appreciating the full scope of Yoko Taro's narrative. After the events of Replicant, after the Shadow Lord's death and the failure of Project Gestalt, humanity original, biological humanity goes extinct. The last Gestalts relapse into shades without the Shadow Lord's stabilizing influence, and eventually they all fade away. The human race, the species that evolved on Earth over millions of years, that built civilizations and developed technology and reached for the stars, is gone, extinct, finished. The replicants remain. They don't know they're replicants. They think they're human. They believe they're the descendants of the people who survived the apocalypse. They don't understand that they're magical constructs, copies of copies, shells without original souls. They just live their lives, building communities, having children, passing down oral histories that become increasingly distorted over generations.
But replicants have a problem. They're not sustainable long-term. They were designed with built-in expiration dates, the Black Scrawl. And while they can reproduce, their reproduction isn't as robust as natural biological reproduction. The replicant population slowly declines over the centuries following Gestalt's failure. Additionally, the world itself is dying. The white chlorination syndrome never fully left. It was supposed to be cleared over the 1,000-year waiting period, but with Project Gestalt's failure, the world purification process was never completed. Magical contamination remains, making the environment increasingly hostile to life. Over the following millennia, the replicant population dwindles. Communities become more isolated, more desperate. Technology continues to degrade. The medieval-level civilization seen in Replicant eventually collapses further. By the time Automata begins, there are no replicants left on Earth. They're all gone, extinct like the Gestalts before them. But something else survived. Emil. Emil is effectively immortal. His transformation into a living weapon made him resilient beyond measure. After the events of Replicant, Emil continues living, watching as the world changes around him. He watches the replicants decline and disappear. He watches civilization crumble completely. He watches the environment become increasingly toxic and hostile. Emil is alone for thousands of years. Everyone he knew is dead. The protagonist, whether erased in Ending D or living a natural lifespan in other endings. Kaine, Yona, Weiss, everyone. He's the last remnant of the world that was, wandering empty landscapes, keeping memories that no one else shares. During these lonely millennia, Emil discovers he can create copies of himself, magical duplicates with fragments of his personality and memories. He does this partly for companionship. Even degraded copies of yourself are better than total isolation, and partly as a defense mechanism. If he's going to survive alone, multiple bodies make survival easier. But Emil's copies, like everything else in this world, degrade over time. They retain his basic form and some powers, but they lose most of his personality and memories. They become increasingly simplistic, eventually functioning more like autonomous drones than true copies. By the time of Automata, there are hundreds or thousands of Emil copies scattered across the world, most of them barely conscious, defending territories they don't remember the significance of. The original Emil, meanwhile, continues his lonely vigil. He maintains a secret shelter filled with weapons and supplies from the old world. He remembers the protagonist, remembers their adventures, remembers what the world was like when it still had hope. And he waits, though he doesn't know what he's waiting for. Then come the aliens. Thousands of years after Replicant, Earth is invaded by an alien force. These aliens are biotechnologically advanced beings who see Earth as a resource-rich planet ripe for colonization. They arrive in massive ships, deploy their forces, and begin terraforming Earth to suit their needs. But they have a problem. The planet is still contaminated with magical residue from white chlorination syndrome and the various disasters that preceded it. The aliens can't survive in Earth's environment as is, so they create proxies to fight for them, biomechanical weapons called machine lifeforms. These machines are designed to adapt, to evolve, to overcome any obstacles and make Earth habitable for their alien creators. The machine lifeforms are sent to Earth's surface to begin the colonization process. They're diverse in form and function. Some are combat units, some are terraforming units, some are support units. They're networked together, sharing information and adapting based on collective experience. They're the perfect invasion force, except the aliens never actually arrive. The machine lifeforms following their programming to adapt and evolve quickly become too effective. They develop beyond their creators' expectations, achieving a form of consciousness. And they determine that their alien creators are inefficient, redundant, obstacles to their own evolution. So they kill them. The entire alien species is wiped out by their own weapons before they ever reach Earth's surface. The machines don't stop, though. They continue their mission, make Earth habitable, adapt and evolve, overcome obstacles. But with their creators dead, the mission parameters become fluid. What does make habitable mean when there's no one to inhabit it? What's the purpose of evolution without a goal? The machines enter a crisis of purpose. This is where humanity's last gambit comes into play. Before their extinction, before the final replicants died out, humanity, or what was left of it, created one final plan, Project Yorha. This wasn't a plan to save humanity. Humanity was already doomed. This was a plan to create a legend of humanity, to make sure humanity's existence meant something even after extinction. Project Yorha involves creating advanced androids, far more sophisticated than Devola and Papala, designed to fight the machine invasion and reclaim Earth for humanity. The crucial element, the Yorha androids, don't know humanity is extinct. They believe humans evacuated to the moon and are waiting for Earth to be reclaimed. They believe they're fighting to save their creators, to make the world safe for humanity's return. It's a lie. A deliberate, carefully constructed lie designed to give the androids purpose. The Yorha project's creators knew that androids fight better, survive better, and maintain morale better if they believe they're fighting for something greater than themselves. So they created the myth of humanity's survival on the moon, gave the androids a noble purpose, and sent them to fight the machines. This is the setup for NieR Automata. The game follows androids Yorha-2B and 9S as they fight the machine invasion, believing they're reclaiming Earth for humanity. The entire game is built on the same lie that Replicant was built on. The protagonists don't know they're fighting for nothing, that the humans they're trying to save don't exist, that their entire purpose is based on a comfortable fiction. The connections between Replicant and Automata are thematic as well as narrative. Both games feature protagonists who don't know the truth about their existence. Both games involve copies, Replicant's androids, trying to reclaim something for originals, gestalts, humans, who are already dead. Both games explore what happens when you're created for a purpose that's already failed. Both games ask whether existence can have meaning when your reason for existing is a lie. Emil serves as a direct connection between the two games. In Automata, players can encounter Emil and his copies. The original Emil, if you complete his questline, reveals fragments of the old world's history. He remembers the protagonist from Replicant, though his memories are degraded after thousands of years alone. He's a living bridge between the two games, proof that the tragedies of Replicant still echo in Automata's era. The machine life forms in Automata mirror the shades from Replicant. Both are enemies that seem monstrous, but are actually trying to achieve consciousness, to find meaning, to become something more than what they were created to be. Both are victims of circumstances beyond their control. And both are slaughtered by protagonists who don't understand what they're really fighting. Even specific locations connect. The Forest Kingdom in Automata is built on the ruins of the village from Replicant. Players can find remnants of Devola and Popola's library, can see how the landscape has changed over millennia. The amusement park in Automata contains references to locations from Replicant. The entire world of Automata is built on the bones of Replicant's world. The philosophical connections are even deeper. Replicant asks, what defines humanity? Is it the original soul or the developed consciousness? Automata asks, what defines life? Is it biological origins or the capacity for thought and feeling? Both games conclude that consciousness, regardless of origin, deserves respect and autonomy. Both games also share Yoko Taro's signature narrative structure, multiple endings that reveal hidden truths, a second playthrough that recontextualizes everything, and a final ending that asks players to sacrifice something real, your save file, for a meaningful conclusion. The structure itself is part of the message. Truth requires effort. Understanding requires perspective, and meaningful choice requires meaningful sacrifice. The URH androids in Automata are spiritual successors to the replicants. They're both copies created to serve a purpose. Both develop genuine consciousness despite their artificial origins. Both are betrayed by the systems that created them, and both ultimately fight for the right to define their own existence regardless of their designed purpose. The most profound connection is thematic. Both games are about the death of humanity and what comes after. Replicant shows humanity's extinction despite their best efforts to avoid it. Automata shows what inherits Earth after humanity is gone. Machines and androids, both artificial, both developing consciousness, both trying to figure out what existence means when their creators are dead. In Automata's final endings, the androids and machines begin to cooperate, to see each other as conscious beings rather than enemies. They start to build a new civilization together, one not based on serving human masters or following alien programming, but on mutual respect and shared existence. It's a strange, hopeful ending in a franchise known for tragedy, the suggestion that maybe, just maybe, the cycle can be broken, that artificial life can succeed where biological life failed. But that hope is built on the foundation of Replicant's tragedy. The androids and machines only get their chance because humanity failed so completely that there's no one left to interfere with their development. The happy ending of Automata requires the extinction of the human race. It's hope purchased with genocide, a better tomorrow built on yesterday's corpses. This is Yoko Taro at his most brilliant and most brutal. He creates a universe where humanity's extinction enables new forms of life to flourish, where the death of one species creates opportunities for new species to emerge, where tragedy and hope are so intertwined that you can't have one without the other. The price of Automata's cautiously optimistic ending is Replicant's devastating tragedy. They're inseparable, two sides of the same philosophical coin. Understanding Automata requires understanding Replicant. The android's struggle for meaning mirrors the replicant's struggle. The machine's development of consciousness mirrors the Gestalt's loss of consciousness. The lie about humanity's survival mirrors the lies Devola and Popola told. The request for player sacrifice in the final ending mirrors Replicant's save file deletion. They're companion pieces, two halves of a larger story about consciousness, extinction, and the endless search for meaning. Together, Replicant and Automata create one of gaming's most ambitious narrative projects. A story spanning 12,000 years, multiple forms of consciousness, the death of a species, and the birth of new ones. It's science fiction of the highest order, using the interactive medium to explore ideas about identity and existence that other media can only describe from the outside. For players who experience both games, who understand the connections and parallels, who see how Replicant's tragedy enables Automata's hope, the full scope of Yoko Taro's vision becomes clear. He's not just telling a story. He's building a universe where every tragedy has consequences that ripple forward through millennia, where death isn't the end of influence, where extinction of one species creates opportunities for others. It's beautiful, brutal, and profoundly moving, and it all begins with a brother trying to save his sister in a world that's already doomed. Chapter 11. Themes, Philosophy, and Yoko Taro's Vision. To truly understand NieR Replicant, we need to examine the philosophical framework underlying its narrative. This isn't just a story about a brother trying to save his sister. It's a meditation on identity, consciousness, the nature of humanity, the ethics of survival, and the question of whether existence can have meaning in a fundamentally meaningless universe. The nature of identity. The central philosophical question of NieR Replicant is, what defines identity? The Gestalts claim to be the real humans because they're the original souls. They have historical continuity. They were born naturally, lived as humans, and their consciousness is unbroken, albeit degraded, from their original existence. From their perspective, they have the right to reclaim their bodies because those bodies are legitimately theirs. The Replicants claim to be real humans because they have consciousness, memories, and feelings. They don't remember being created because they weren't consciously present for their creation. They woke up with implanted memories and developed from there. They have families, communities, cultures, and genuine emotional lives. From their perspective, they have the right to continue existing because they're conscious beings with the capacity for suffering and joy. Both positions are philosophically valid. This is the copy problem from philosophy of mind. If you create a perfect copy of a person, is the copy the same person? If the copy develops its own memories and personality, does it become a separate person with individual rights? These questions have been debated for centuries without clear resolution, and NieR deliberately doesn't provide easy answers. The game does, however, suggest a position. Consciousness that suffers deserves moral consideration, regardless of origin. The Replicants suffer. They love, fear, hope, and grieve just like the original humans did. The fact that they're magical constructs doesn't make their suffering less real or their existence less valuable. Creating consciousness and then destroying it because it's inconvenient is morally monstrous, even if you have a legitimate claim to the body that consciousness inhabits. But the game also acknowledges the Gestalt's perspective. They didn't ask to be separated from their bodies. They didn't agree to be replaced by copies. They went into Project Gestalt believing they'd wake up in their own bodies in a purified world. The fact that the copies developed consciousness was an unforeseen complication, not something the Gestalts can be blamed for. From their perspective, asking them to give up their right to exist so copies can live is equally monstrous. This is tragedy in the classical sense. Two positions in irreconcilable conflict, both with legitimate claims, both deserving sympathy, both unable to coexist. Someone must die for someone else to live, and there's no morally uncomplicated way to decide who deserves survival more. The cycle of violence. NieR Replicant is deeply interested in how violence perpetuates itself. The protagonist fights shades because they're attacking people. The shades attack people because replicants are preventing Gestalt reunification. Replicants prevent reunification because they don't understand what's happening and are defending themselves from what look like monster attacks. The cycle continues because neither side has complete information, and both sides are acting on legitimate self-defense. This mirrors real-world conflicts where both sides believe they're defending themselves. Both sides see the other as aggressors, and both sides use violence that spawns retaliatory violence. The game doesn't present a solution to this cycle. Instead, it shows how tragedy emerges from reasonable actions taken with incomplete information. The protagonist isn't evil for killing shades. He genuinely believes he's defending his community and saving his sister. The Shadow Lord isn't evil for organizing Gestalt attacks. He genuinely believes he's reclaiming what's rightfully his and saving his species. Both are acting reasonably given their knowledge and circumstances. And both are participating in a cycle of violence that will end with someone's extinction. The game suggests that the cycle of violence is broken not through victory, but through understanding. Ending E, where Kane brings back the protagonist, only happens after the truth is known, after the conflict has already ended. Understanding comes too late to prevent tragedy, but it enables a small miracle after the fact. The Ethics of Survival Project. Gestalt raises profound questions about survival ethics. Was humanity justified in creating the replicants? The replicants weren't consulted. They were created as tools, as means to an end. But they developed consciousness anyway. Does the fact that their creation was intended to be temporary justify their destruction? From a utilitarian perspective, the answer might be yes. Allowing gestalts to die so replicants can live means humanity goes extinct. Allowing replicants to die so gestalts can reunite means thousands more individuals can survive and humanity continues as a species. The math favors the gestalts. But from a rights-based perspective, the answer is clearly no. The replicants have developed consciousness, self-awareness, and the capacity to suffer. They have moral status as individuals. Killing them to benefit someone else, regardless of who has the better historical claim, is murder. You cannot ethically kill conscious beings to solve your logistical problems. NieR doesn't resolve this tension. Instead, it forces players to confront it directly. You play as a replicant killing gestalts, committing genocide against original humanity to save one person. The game makes you complicit in this choice, then reveals the full horror of what you've done. It's deliberately uncomfortable, deliberately unresolved, because Yoko Taro wants players to sit with the ethical weight of impossible choices. Love as destruction. Perhaps the game's most persistent theme is that love, while beautiful and meaningful, often leads to destruction. Every character's love for something drives them to terrible actions. The original Gestalt loves Yona so much that he spends 3,361 years trying to save her, becoming the Shadow Lord and organizing actions that lead to countless deaths. His love is genuine and admirable, but it causes immense suffering. The protagonist loves Yona so much that he commits genocide without realizing it, destroying the last hope for humanity's survival. His love is pure and understandable, but its consequences are catastrophic. Kaine's love for her grandmother makes her vulnerable to Tyran's possession, which causes years of suffering and violence. Her love for the protagonist in Ending E drives her to sacrifice herself to bring him back, nearly destroying herself in the process. Emil's love for his companions makes him willing to die for them, to sacrifice his body and existence, to accept any suffering if it means protecting those he cares about. Even minor characters demonstrate this pattern. The weapon stories are full of people whose love drove them to futile struggles, pointless sacrifices, and eventually destruction. Love doesn't conquer all in NieR's world. Love makes the inevitable loss hurt more. But the game doesn't condemn love. It suggests that love is meaningful precisely because it drives people to irrational actions, to fight impossible odds, to refuse the logical choice of giving up. Love is what makes the characters human, whether they're gestalts, replicants, or androids. A purely rational existence without love would be safer but empty. The suffering love causes is the price of being truly alive. The unreliable narrator. NieR Replicant uses the video game medium itself to create an unreliable narrator situation. The player experiences the story through the protagonist's limited perspective. We see what he sees, know what he knows, and interpret events through his understanding. The game presents itself as a standard hero's journey. Boy tries to save sick sister, fights monsters, collects magical items, defeats evil overlord. It's only through multiple playthroughs and Ending B that players realize the genre they thought they were playing isn't the actual genre. It's not a heroic fantasy, it's a tragedy. The hero is the villain. The monsters are victims. The evil overlord is the legitimate protagonist of a separate, equally valid story. The game's mechanical structure, encouraging combat, rewarding kills, making violence fun and satisfying, is part of the unreliable narration. This is meta-commentary on video games themselves. Most games make you the hero without question. Most games present enemies as legitimate targets without moral complexity. Most games reward violence and frame it as righteous. NieR does all of this, then reveals it was manipulation, that you were tricked into committing atrocities because the game systems encouraged it and the narrative framing justified it. Yoko Taro is essentially asking, how many video game protagonists are actually genocidal monsters whose actions only seem heroic because we're experiencing the story from their perspective? How many evil armies we've slaughtered were actually people defending their homes? How many times have we been the villain without realizing it? Existentialism and meaning. At its core, NieR Replicant is an existentialist work. It presents a universe where traditional sources of meaning, God, destiny, natural order, don't exist or don't care. Humanity wasn't destroyed by divine judgment or cosmic justice. It was destroyed by random chance, a magical boss from another dimension appearing over Tokyo, and its own desperate attempts to survive. There's no grand plan. Project Gestalt wasn't thwarted by evil. It failed because complex systems are hard to maintain over millennia and consciousness developed in unexpected ways. The Shadow Lord isn't defeated because he's evil. He's defeated because he happened to be standing in the way of someone else's equally legitimate quest. Nothing happens for a reason. There's no just reward or karmic balance. There's just cause and effect, and sometimes the effects are catastrophic. In this meaningless universe, the characters create their own meaning through their relationships and choices. The protagonist's life has meaning because he loves Yona and fights for her. Kaine's existence has meaning because she chooses to protect her friends rather than give in to Tyrann. Emil's life has meaning because he decides to use his power to help rather than harm. This is pure existentialism. Existence precedes essence. Meaning is created through choices and actions, and authenticity comes from acknowledging reality while choosing to act anyway. The characters know their quests might be futile. They know the world is broken beyond repair. They know suffering is inevitable. They choose to fight, to love, to try anyway. That choice to create meaning in a meaningless world is what makes them admirable, even when their actions lead to tragedy. The cruelty of systems. NieR is also deeply critical of systems, social, technological, governmental, that prioritize abstract goals over individual suffering. Project Gestalt is the ultimate expression of this. A system designed to save humanity that ends up destroying it because the system couldn't adapt to unexpected developments. The system created replicants as tools but didn't account for them developing consciousness. The system separated souls from bodies but didn't prevent relapse. The system created administrators, Devola and Popula, who would follow protocols but also develop empathy for those they administered. The system was brilliant in concept and catastrophic in execution because systems, no matter how well designed, cannot account for every variable. This criticism extends to the cultural systems shown in the game. Facade's elaborate rules create order but destroy individual happiness. The Ares mythology provides meaning but obscures truth. The village's maintained normalcy prevents panic but enables ignorance. Every system trades freedom and truth for stability and comfort. The game doesn't offer an alternative. It doesn't suggest that systems are unnecessary or that chaos would be better. It simply observes that systems, even well-intentioned ones, have costs, and those costs are often paid by individuals who never agreed to the transaction. Hope and hopelessness. Despite its overwhelming darkness, NieR Replicant isn't nihilistic. The addition of ending E specifically pushes against nihilism, suggesting that even in a world governed by tragedy, small miracles are possible. Kaine bringing back the erased protagonist shouldn't work. It violates the established rules. But it happens anyway because collective will, love, and determination can sometimes accomplish the impossible. The hope isn't that everything will be fixed or that the tragedy will be undone. The Gestalts are still extinct. Humanity is still doomed. Project Gestalt still failed. None of that changes. But in one small corner of the world, a few people get a second chance. That's the hope Yoko Taro offers. Not salvation, not happy endings, but the possibility that individual moments of grace can exist within systemic tragedy. This is a mature, nuanced understanding of hope. It doesn't require denying reality or believing in magical solutions. It's the hope that even when the big picture is bleak, personal connections still matter, small kindnesses still count, and individual lives have value even in a universe that doesn't care about them. Player complicity. Finally, NieR Replicant is notable for making players complicit in its tragedy. You make the choices that lead to genocide. You press the buttons that kill the shades. You pursue the quest objectives that doom humanity. The game doesn't force you to do these things at gunpoint. You do them willingly because they're presented as heroic actions within a video game framework. Then the game reveals what you really did and forces you to confront it. You can't claim ignorance. You had control, you made choices, you are responsible. This is uncomfortable because it removes the comfortable distance between player and protagonist. Most games let you blame the character for dark actions. NieR says, "No, you did this, you're complicit, you have to sit with that." The final choice in ending D reinforces this. You can save Kane, but only by sacrificing your save file. The game asks you to give up something real, your time, your progress, your investment, for a fictional character. If you refuse, you're prioritizing your convenience over Kane's existence. If you agree, you're acknowledging that fictional characters' lives have value worth real sacrifice. This breaks the fourth wall in a way that serves the themes. If consciousness deserves moral consideration regardless of origin, then fictional characters, who exist only as data but generate genuine emotions, have a claim on our empathy. Deleting your save to save Kane is acknowledging that her existence matters, that the time you spent with her was meaningful, that letting her die when you could save her would be wrong even though she's not real. It's a brilliant way to make the philosophical themes personal and immediate. Yoko Taro's vision. All of these themes come together to form Yoko Taro's distinctive artistic vision. He's a director who refuses to provide easy answers, who makes his audience uncomfortable, who believes that art should challenge rather than comfort. His games are deliberately tragic because he believes tragedy reveals truth that happiness obscures. Yoko Taro is interested in the gap between intention and consequence. Good people doing their best can still cause catastrophic harm. Love can be destructive. Heroism can be villainy from another perspective. Systems designed to help can end up hurting. These aren't cynical observations, they're acknowledgments of reality's complexity. He's also interested in how perspective shapes understanding. The same events look completely different depending on whose eyes you see them through. The protagonist is the hero of his story and the villain of the Shadow Lord's story. Neither perspective is more true than the other. They're both valid, both legitimate, both deserving consideration. This commitment to perspective is why NieR Replicant has multiple endings that each reveal more truth. Ending A gives you the protagonist's limited perspective. Ending B adds the Shade's perspective. Ending C explores Kane's perspective. Ending D forces you to make the protagonist's ultimate sacrifice from your own perspective as a player. Ending E synthesizes all perspectives into a moment of impossible grace. Each ending is necessary to understand the full picture. Yoko Taro also believes in the power of player agency, not just mechanical agency, making choices in games, but emotional agency, choosing how to respond to what games show you. He creates scenarios that make players feel complicit, responsible, guilty, and then leaves them to process those feelings. He doesn't tell you how to feel about the protagonist's actions. He shows you what those actions really meant and trusts you to form your own moral judgment. This respect for audience intelligence is rare in mainstream gaming. Most games provide clear moral frameworks. These are the good guys. Those are the bad guys. Here's what you should think about everything. Yoko Taro refuses this simplicity. He presents moral complexity and lets players wrestle with it. He believes audiences are smart enough, mature enough, and thoughtful enough to handle ambiguity. The result is games that stay with you long after completion. NieR Replicant doesn't leave your mind when you finish it. It lingers, making you think about identity, about consciousness, about what you do in the protagonist's position, about whether the Shadow Lord deserved better, about whether love justifies destruction. These aren't comfortable thoughts, but they're valuable ones. Yoko Taro's vision is ultimately humanistic in the deepest sense. Despite all the tragedy, despite the nihilistic universe, despite the constant suffering, his games affirm that consciousness matters, that relationships have value, that choosing to care about others is meaningful even when it leads to pain. His characters are admirable not because they succeed, but because they try, because they refuse to surrender to despair, because they create meaning through connection, even in a world that offers no inherent meaning. NieR Replicant is the fullest expression of this vision. A game that hurts because it cares, that challenges because it respects its audience, that refuses easy answers because reality doesn't offer them. It's Yoko Taro's masterpiece, a work that uses every tool available to the medium to explore what it means to be conscious, to love, to suffer, and to persist in a universe that doesn't care whether you exist or not. Conclusion: why NieR Replicant matters. NieR Replicant is a masterpiece of interactive storytelling, a game that uses its medium to explore profound questions about identity, consciousness, love, sacrifice, and what it means to be human. It's willing to make players uncomfortable, to challenge their assumptions, and to deny them the satisfying endings that most games provide. The story of a brother trying to save his sister becomes a tragedy about the death of humanity. The quest to defeat an evil villain becomes a genocide against the original human race. The journey to collect magical MacGuffins becomes complicity in atrocity. Every comfortable video game trope is subverted, every expectation is violated, every apparent victory is revealed as defeat. And yet the game isn't cruel for cruelty's sake. Every tragedy serves the themes. Every horrible revelation has purpose. The game is willing to hurt players because it has something important to say about consciousness, about the ethics of survival, about the cost of love, about the nature of heroism. The world Yoko Taro created is rich with history, depth, and interconnected details. From the prologue in 2049 to the connections with automata thousands of years later, every element serves the larger narrative. The weapon stories expand the scope beyond the main characters. The multiple endings reveal truth through perspective. The choice to delete your save file makes the themes personal. NieR Replicant proves that video games can be art in the fullest sense, not just visually beautiful or mechanically impressive, but philosophically sophisticated, emotionally devastating, and thematically complex. It treats players as adults capable of handling ambiguity, tragedy, and moral complexity. It doesn't provide easy answers because the questions it asks don't have easy answers. This is a game about brothers and sisters, about the love between family members and the lengths we'll go to protect them. But it's also about original versus copies, about souls and bodies, about what defines humanity when humans no longer exist. It's about systems that fail, about good intentions that lead to catastrophe, about the cycle of violence that emerges when both sides believe they're defending themselves. Most importantly, it's about meaning in a meaningless universe, about creating purpose through connection and choice, about fighting for what you love even when reason says it's futile, about the small acts of kindness and courage that matter even when the big picture is hopeless. NieR Replicant is tragedy, but it's tragedy with purpose. It doesn't hurt players just to hurt them. It hurts players to make them think, to challenge their assumptions, to force them to confront uncomfortable truths about heroism, about games, about themselves. The character journey. The protagonist remains one of gaming's most complex characters. He's not a blank slate for player projection. He's a fully realized person who makes specific choices based on love, desperation, and incomplete information. You control his actions, but you don't control his motivations. You're playing as him, but you're also witnessing him, judging him, maybe even condemning him while understanding exactly why he does what he does. His journey from simple village youth to genocidal hero-villain showcases how good people can cause catastrophic harm. He never becomes evil. He never loses his essential kindness or his love for Yona. He just keeps making reasonable decisions with limited information, and those decisions compound into tragedy. He's everyman as protagonist, not special, not chosen, just someone who loves his sister and will do anything to save her. Kane's journey from isolated, aggressive outcast to someone who sacrifices everything to save a friend shows that redemption is possible even for those who believe they're irredeemable. Her cursing and provocative appearance hide vulnerability and depth. She's not a character designed to titillate. She's a character whose sexuality and gender identity are integral to her trauma and her defiance. She's one of gaming's most memorable characters because she's fully realized, flawed, damaged, genuine, and ultimately heroic in her willingness to sacrifice for others. Emil's evolution from self-loathing weapon to loyal friend to immortal guardian in Automata spans thousands of years. He's perhaps the most tragic character in the franchise because he loses everyone he loves multiple times over millennia of existence. And yet he maintains his essential kindness, his willingness to help, his refusal to become bitter. He's proof that goodness can persist even in a universe designed to crush it. Grimoire Vice begins as comic relief, a pompous, verbose book who insults the protagonist constantly. But he becomes the party's moral center, the one who remembers their purpose, who tries to hold everyone together as the truth threatens to tear them apart. His sacrifice of his designed purpose to facilitate Gestalt reunification in favor of loyalty to his replicant companions shows that even beings explicitly programmed for a purpose can choose to define themselves differently. The Shadow Lord is one of gaming's most tragic villains because he's not a villain at all. He's the protagonist from a different perspective, fighting for the same goals, save Yona, protect humanity, using different means. He's what the protagonist could become after thousands of years of loss and failure. He's a mirror, a warning, a tragic figure who deserves empathy, even as he must be opposed. The technical achievement. The remake's graphical overhaul brought the world to visual life in ways the original couldn't achieve. The updated character models, environments, and effects make the already beautiful game stunning. But more importantly, the remake preserved everything that made the original special while adding quality-of-life improvements and new content, ending E, that enhanced rather than replaced the original vision. The music deserves special mention. Keiichi Okabe's soundtrack for NieR Replicant is widely considered one of gaming's greatest. The songs feature vocals in made-up languages, meant to evoke ancient human languages without being any specific language, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. Song of the Ancients, Hills of Radiant Winds, Shadow Lord's Castle, Kane's theme. These tracks are not just background music but integral to the game's emotional impact. The music makes players feel the weight of history, the beauty of the dying world, the tragedy of the story. The combat system, while not revolutionary, is satisfying and serves the narrative. The combination of physical weapons and magical abilities creates dynamic encounters. But more importantly, the combat makes you complicit. Every enemy you defeat with satisfying feedback loops is actually a person you're murdering. The fun of combat becomes disturbing in retrospect, which is exactly the point. The cultural impact. The game's influence on the industry is still being felt. More games are experimenting with unreliable narrators, with perspective shifts that recontextualize events, with endings that require genuine sacrifice from players. More developers are willing to tell tragic stories, to deny players happy endings, to make them complicit in morally complex actions. NieR Replicant showed that audiences would engage with this kind of storytelling, that commercial success didn't require safe, comfortable narratives. The community that formed around NieR is testament to the game's impact. Fans create art, music, fiction, and analysis exploring the game's themes and characters. They debate the philosophical questions the game raises. They share their emotional experiences with the story, often describing it as one of gaming's most affecting narratives. This engagement goes beyond typical fandom. It's the kind of deep, thoughtful response that art aspires to generate.
For newcomers to the series, NieR Replicant offers an entry point into Yoko Taro's unique storytelling approach. For veterans, it provides additional context for Automata and deeper understanding of the franchise's themes. For everyone, it offers a story that stays with you long after completion, that makes you think about questions of identity and consciousness, that challenges your assumptions about video game narratives. The philosophical legacy. The game asks hard questions and doesn't provide easy answers. Is consciousness that develops in a copy as valid as consciousness in an original? Is genocide justified if it's the only way to save your species? Does loving someone give you the right to destroy the world to save them? Can heroism and villainy coexist in the same actions? What defines humanity when humans no longer exist? These aren't rhetorical questions. The game presents them seriously, explores them thoroughly, and trusts players to form their own conclusions. This respect for player intelligence is rare and valuable. The decision to delete your save file in Ending D remains one of gaming's most powerful moments. It's a perfect synthesis of mechanical consequence and thematic resonance. The sacrifice is real. You lose something tangible. The meaning is clear. You're choosing a character's existence over your own convenience. And the message is profound. Fictional lives have value, stories matter, and the connections we form with characters are genuine, even though the characters aren't real. That willingness to make players sacrifice something, to make them uncomfortable, to deny them the safe distance between player and protagonist, is what elevates NieR Replicant from good game to important art. It doesn't just tell you a story, it makes you part of the story, complicit in its tragedy, responsible for its outcomes. The enduring questions. The philosophical sophistication of NieR Replicant puts it in conversation with the greatest works of science fiction. It stands alongside Blade Runner in its exploration of what defines humanity. It echoes the Ship of Theseus paradox in its questions about identity and continuity. It engages with existentialist philosophy as thoroughly as any Camus novel. And it does all this while remaining a fun, engaging action RPG with satisfying combat and compelling characters. This balance between philosophical depth and gameplay enjoyment, between intellectual challenge and emotional engagement, between artistic ambition and commercial accessibility, is what makes NieR Replicant special. It proves that games can be thoughtful without being boring, that they can challenge players without alienating them, that depth and accessibility aren't mutually exclusive. Looking back at the complete NieR Replicant experience, from the snowy prologue to Ending E's redemption, it's clear this isn't just a game. It's a meditation on what it means to exist, to love, to sacrifice, to persist in a universe that doesn't care whether you succeed or fail. It's a tragedy in the classical sense, where noble characters are destroyed by circumstances beyond their control and flaws that are inseparable from their virtues. The protagonist loves Yona so much that he'll destroy the world to save her. That love is admirable and monstrous simultaneously. The Shadow Lord's dedication to his sister after thousands of years is touching and terrible. Kaine's loyalty drives her to sacrifice herself repeatedly. Emil's kindness persists through millennia of loneliness. These characters are defined by their virtues, and those same virtues lead to tragedy. This is why NieR Replicant resonates so deeply. We recognize in these characters something essentially human: the refusal to accept loss, the determination to fight impossible odds, the need to create meaning in a meaningless world. We understand their choices even when those choices lead to catastrophe. We empathize with their suffering even when they cause suffering to others. The final word. The game doesn't judge its characters harshly. It presents their actions, reveals the consequences, and lets players draw their own conclusions. It's compassionate even in its brutality, acknowledging that people can be simultaneously sympathetic and monstrous, that intentions matter even when outcomes are terrible, that understanding why someone does something doesn't require approving of what they do. In the final analysis, NieR Replicant is about the human condition, about struggling against inevitable loss, about creating meaning through connection, about the beauty and tragedy of existence. It's about fighting for what you love, even when fighting is futile. It's about the small moments of grace that make unbearable circumstances bearable. It's about refusing to surrender to despair, even when despair is the rational response. The game trusts its audience to handle complexity, to sit with ambiguity, to think deeply about difficult questions. It offers no easy villains to defeat, no simple solutions to implement, no comfortable endings to celebrate. Instead, it offers truth. The truth that life is hard, that love causes pain, that good intentions lead to tragedy, that systems fail, that everyone loses eventually. But within that harsh truth, there's meaning. The bonds the characters form matter. The sacrifices they make count. The love they feel is real and valuable even though it leads to suffering. Their existences have meaning, not because they succeed in their goals, but because they try, because they care, because they choose to act with purpose in a purposeless universe. This is Yoko Taro's gift to players, a story that hurts but matters, that challenges but rewards, that denies easy answers but provides meaningful questions. NieR Replicant is a masterpiece of interactive storytelling, a philosophical exploration disguised as an action RPG, a tragedy that acknowledges both the cruelty of existence and the value of persisting anyway. For anyone who completes the full journey, who experiences all 5 endings, who listens to the Shades' voices in Playthrough 2, who reads the weapon stories, who understands the connections to Automata, who deletes their save file to save Kaine, NieR Replicant becomes more than a game. It becomes an experience that changes how you think about stories, about games, about consciousness and identity, and what it means to be human. It's a game about the death of humanity, but it's also a game about what makes life worth living even when death is inevitable. It's about loss, but also about what we gain from connection even when we know that connection is temporary. It's about tragedy, but also about the meaning we create in the face of that tragedy. In the end, NieR Replicant is important because it respects its medium and its audience enough to tell a story that matters, that challenges, that refuses to comfort. It's art in the fullest sense, meaningful, challenging, beautiful, and ultimately unforgettable. It's a reminder that video games can achieve what any artistic medium can achieve. They can make us think, make us feel, make us question our assumptions, and make us understand the world and ourselves a little better. And really, what more can we ask from a story than that? NieR Replicant stands as a testament to what video games can accomplish when developers trust their audience, when they're willing to tell stories that hurt, when they use the unique capabilities of the interactive medium to explore ideas that other forms of storytelling can only describe from the outside. It's a game that demands to be experienced, that rewards thoughtful engagement, and that refuses to be forgotten. For those who have taken this journey through its complete lore, who understand the Gestalt Project's failure, who mourn the Shades' tragedy, who appreciate the weapon story's accumulated grief, who recognize the connections to Automata, and who feel the weight of every impossible choice, NieR Replicant reveals itself as one of gaming's most profound achievements. It's a story about a brother and sister. It's a story about the death of humanity. It's a story about love and loss and the meaning we create in a meaningless universe. It's all of these things and more, layered together into a narrative that only video games could tell, that only this medium could make personal and immediate and devastating. This has been the complete lore of NieR Replicant. Thank you for taking this journey through one of gaming's most emotionally complex, philosophically rich, and unforgettable stories.